They looked at me and they're like, we're drug dealers. This is just a front. That group of gentlemen is the group that later on would become known as the Medellín Drug Cartel. Suddenly, Manny tells me, here's this contact. At 5 o'clock in the morning, he's going to deliver you a big old U-Haul, and that averaged 600 kilos.
Jorge Valdez is the original cocaine cowboy. He was the first Cuban-born drug trafficker to link with the founding members of the Medellín Cartel when they first arrived in Miami back in the mid-1970s, when coke was still $60,000 a key, wholesale. He began as their accountant and established the first international banking system for cocaine money laundering, until eventually he opened his own drug routes and started moving blow by the tons to every major market in the United States. Jorge was to cocaine what Ray Kroc was to McDonald's hamburgers. He didn't invent the product, but he franchised it, made it a brand, and now you can find it on every street corner. He wasn't as much a cowboy as he was a cocaine pioneer. He was living the life of an untouchable drug lord until one day he'd had enough. Having had a spiritual awakening, Jorge voluntarily walked away from the business, forfeiting tens of millions of dollars and spending the next decade in federal prison, where he received a doctorate in theological studies. Today, he's a successful lecturer, author, and philanthropist, and lives happily and legally in Florida, surrounded by his children and grandchildren. I just finished his autobiography, Coming Clean, the true story of a cocaine drug lord and his unexpected encounter with God. I'm telling you guys, it's fantastic. It is one of the best narco books I've ever read. You can go get it on Amazon or on Jorge's website right now. And for a bonus chat with Jorge, where he exposes the truth about players like Willie Falcone, Griselda Blanco, and the other alleged Miami cocaine cowboys made famous by the Netflix series, head over to patreon.com/TheConnectShow. You're not going to want to miss that one. He gives the dirt and spills the tea about the truth about that era. And also, do me a favor if you could, leave us a like and a comment. It really helps the video out. I'm here in our new studio in Austin, Texas, excited for a new year and a new slate of guests with incredible stories like Jorge's. Ladies and gentlemen, there's nobody in the game like him. Enjoy Jorge Valdez right here on The Connect with Johnny Mitchell.
I had a Hawker jet, $1 million worth of cars. I spent my whole life just playboy life. I get arrested in Panama. I get kidnapped. I get tortured. And the prosecutor said to me, I want it all. Walks over, opens the door. DA, FBI, IRS, and Customs comes out. It was the first time in my life that everything just crumbled. I don't miss the consequences that the life brought and the emptiness.
Do your sons wear suits like you?
No.
I know, it's a lost art form.
I wore suits since I was 20 years old.
Yeah.
All my life.
I'm just trying to imagine you being this 20-year-old kid walking around in a suit all day, setting up shell companies.
3 different suits a day. I changed to that. When the government seized my suit, they seized 100 Brioning suits.
You're setting up foreign shell companies, overseas bank accounts. I mean, you could have been a great, legit entrepreneur. I think most Cuban immigrants seem to be great entrepreneurs. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I think because we have this adventurous spirit, and a big part of it was, seeing our parents lose everything that they have built and start all over again, and realizing that, see, the biggest thing about failure as an entrepreneur, or what makes a good entrepreneur, is being convinced that you can fail and it's not a failure, right? It's a learning experience. I mean, Disney went bankrupt 7 times before he created Mickey. But knowing that you can do it again. See, like I'm convinced today, I'm 69 years old. I'm convinced that if I lose everything and you drop me butt naked in China, in 5 years, I'm going to own some Chinese restaurants. I have no doubt. I was walking out of prison in 1994, and I never forget my counselor. He looked at me and said, why are you going home? You're a legend here. Everybody loves you, admires you. You got free food, housing. You don't have to worry. And who's going to hire you? Nobody's hiring convicted accountants. I looked at him and I said, and I actually was joking at this moment. I said, God told me he's going to grant me favor before kings. And he's like, there's no more kings. I said, of course there is. The president of the United States is a king. He said, it'd be a cold day in hell before you enter the White House. 3 years later, I had White House clearance. Wow. I addressed the Congress, the Senate. I addressed the flag officers at the Pentagon. You know, I'd done the National Day of Prayer. I did an event with Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher in Washington. I was the keynote speaker. So I'd done a lot of events. And I walked out of that prison dead broke. Didn't know how I was going to feed my family. For the first 3 years, while I was doing my PhD, I was living literally, I got full scholarship at Loyola University, and I was given $7,000 a year stipend per semester. So I was living off of that, and then the Pew Foundation named me the doctoral student in America, and they gave me $7,000. And I was teaching, I was professor's assistant in the Greek department at Wheaton College. I taught myself Greek in prison, and they gave me a card that I could eat at the library for free, and $25 at the end of the week. And for 3 years, this was my food. I would go to the cafeteria. They had the best, they had named the #1 cafeteria in college in America. And I would eat, and then I take a baggie. And I would be praying, God, you know that David stole at the temple. I'm not stealing, they're going to throw this away. And that was our dinner for my wife and I. And then on Sunday, when the cafeteria was closed, I used that $25 to buy me a Giordano's pizza with a liter of Diet Coke. Our dates for those 3 years, for my wife and I, our dates was we go to Barnes & Noble on Friday nights, and we take our own coffee because we couldn't afford to buy a cup of coffee. And I had one of the students that I would tutor in the Greek department. She worked at the movie theater, and like every couple of weeks, she let my wife and I go and, and go to the movie for free.
And this is coming from a guy that owned planes, helicopters, $1 million horses just a generation before that.
I mean, literally 5 years before that. 5 years before that, when I was arrested in Mobile, Alabama, which I'd never been in my entire life, in 1990, I walked into the U.S. Attorney's office. Jeff Sessions was the U.S. Attorney at that time. And my attorney said to me, we can beat this case. There's only one witness against you. Made up a case. The guy was making it up. He said he took this friend of mine, Dickie Lynn, who had brought in a lot of loads with me. And he said, yeah, Dickie Lynn came to I flew him to Miami. Jorge Valdez picked him up. Then 8 o'clock at night, Dickie Lynn comes back without Jorge Valdez and a suitcase with $3 million and said, look, George just paid me $3 million. Well, everyone knows that doesn't happen like that, right? But that guy that was going to be the witness that night died in an airplane crash. While he was smuggling, while he was a U.S. witness, while he was a witness for the government, he was smuggling cocaine in DA airplanes. Wow. So my attorney said, you have no case. But, I just become a Christian 3 months ago. I've been an atheist all my life. And I had a man witness to me for 3 years, every day. And I had to turn my life around. The thing with a lot of people, they come out of prison and they said like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm never going to do it again. No, really, they're sorry they got caught, right? Because I live with thousands of them. Yeah. If they had a chance to go back to their life, they would. Mm-hmm. Well, I walked away from that life making $1 million a month for doing nothing. Wow. Nothing. Wow. And I walked away because I had to save my family. That wasn't who I grew up to be. That wasn't the kid that the parents sacrificed so much working in factories to put through school, to give an education, to give unbelievable morals and integrity. Yeah. So when all that came to clash, and it was coming to clash for a long time, I actually believe that my mother's prayer, I think that the prayers of a mother are the most powerful thing in the world. Kept working inside me, and I was on turmoil. I mean, I wrote a blog about a few years ago. I said, I'm 21 years old. I make between $1 million to $3 million a month. I got planes, yachts, $1 million worth of cars, mansions, and I go to bed with the most beautiful woman in America every day. And I want to die. All right. I want to die.
So this epic starts in 1966. You're 10 years old. You come from a middle-class Cuban
upper class
family, right?
Yeah, very wealthy family.
During the Bautista era, where there was still wealth to be made in Cuba, your father owned a furniture manufacturing facility, worked very hard, but you come from good stock, and everybody's educated and smart as a whip.
My mother was one of 4 women to graduate from University of Havana.
Wow.
Back in those days.
That was unheard of.
Well, think about back in those days. If a woman didn't get married at 16, 17, she was considered loosey-goosey, I think. My mother didn't get married till she was 30.
Whoa.
Now, I believe
broad.
My mother had an apartment on Fifth Avenue. She dated a guy that played for the New York Yankees. So my mom was very educated, very religious,
But also breaking social norms.
Oh, yeah.
Which is it. And that is fascinating because her son is kind of a chip off the block in many ways, as we'll see. Do you think, so 66, Castro has been in power now for 7 years. Do you, and they're becoming communists. This is after the Bay of Pigs. They've turned to the Soviets and they've announced, hey, we're a collectivist society. Do you think they would have seized your father's businesses?
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. I had two godfathers, my Colombian godfather, who I call my godfather, and my godfather who baptized me. Oscar Perez, who baptized me, was the wealthiest family in Cuba. His father came in the 1800s from Spain, built a $10 million mansion in Havana. He founded the Havana Country Club, the Yacht Club, the Pony Club. Yeah. Very wealthy family. He's the one. My dad was very poor. He worked at a cafeteria. And Oscar would have breakfast and lunch there every day. Eventually, Oscar said to my dad, after so many years, listen, my dad said, if I don't get a job, he's going to disown me. Let's start a company. Do you have any idea? My father said, yeah, let's start a lumber company. And they became very wealthy. Well, my godfather, Oscar, was very wealthy. My dad became very wealthy. And that's the type of, very entrepreneur, My dad left school when he was 6, but by the time that my brother and I were 10 years old, my dad had made us read every major autobiography of every great world history. Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Napoleon, Jose Fouché. I guarantee you, out of the millions of people going to watch this podcast, I wonder how many know who Jose Fouché ever was. And he was one of the biggest figure, in the Napoleonic era. He's the guy after whom Machiavellic term comes about. So he had made us read all that. And my dad read ferociously, And
so he saw the writings on the wall, though. And interestingly enough, just like how you turned in all your drug money, he kind of forfeited everything that he had to the communists. And you guys hopped on a plane to Miami with, millions of other Cubans. Back then in the 60s, Cuba, they were still allowing people to leave, right?
Yeah. Fidel made a deal. We were like the last of what they call the freedom flights. He made a deal that if you had a relative in the United States, and this was after the Bay of Pigs, they could claim you. And so my dad didn't want to come. That's the funny thing. My dad did not want to. He did not think the communist was going to ever take over his companies and do all that. My mom did, because my mom was very anti-communist. We were in school, and in school, Fidel, very smart. He started by the equivalent of the Boy Scouts, but we call the pioneers. So the pioneers were always, telling about communism and, which ideal, if you read Karl Marx, Das Kapital, and the Communist Manifesto in paper, they're great.
Sounds great.
Everybody wants to be a communist, right? Mm-hmm. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
But we come home and tell my mom all this great communist stuff and that God doesn't exist and that's all BS. And my mom is like, that's full of shit. God is everything. And so she was very anti-communist. So she's like, I'm not raising my kids in a communist country. Yeah. And she was willing to leave it all. And my mom had been rich since little birth. Yeah. Because her father was a big figure in the War of Independence from Spain.
Wow. So that's incredible. Yeah, communism's really antithetical to the Latino culture, which is very religious and, very pious and very, everything that Karl Marx was not.
Right, exactly.
So you're here in Miami and you struggle, for a good 5-7 years in your adolescence and early high school. Your family is poor and they're really living the immigrant story, which is poverty.
Oh man, listen, we went to, and that's, so the funny thing, at the airport, my mother gets left behind. And my father did not want to come. My mother grabbed my hand, I was 10, my brother 9, and my sister 5, and she said, take him to America, I'll see you one day. Now, mind you, my father, who and I became my best friend, very close, in Cuba, I hardly spoke to my father. I had to ask for an appointment to speak to my father. That's that type of generation. So we became close in Miami. When my dad saw me getting on the airplane with my brother and sister, then then he came. But 11 of us went to live in a one-bedroom apartment in Little Havana writing down what time we're going to piss because everyone had to go to school, work. That day, I became an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
That day, I said to myself, if we're coming to America, my mom said we're coming to America to be with God, and this is God.
Yeah.
We're living a very comfortable life in Cuba. Now we have nothing and literally going hungry. We would have 2 raw eggs in the morning with this Vietnam powdered milk that never makes, I can't even drink milk till today, I throw up. And we would have nothing till dinner time.
Yeah.
At dinner time, we would have rice, beans, and a vegetable. That's it.
So you were living in America how most Cubans live in Cuba.
Oh my God. I remember a friend of mine, show you how my dad was. I remember a friend of mine seeing him bringing a sandwich, ham sandwich to school. And I thought, Michael, at that time, that was a Wagyu prime ribeye. That sandwich, man, I wanted that sandwich so bad, you know? And finally I had the guts to ask him, like, hey, where do you get the money for your parents? How do they get money? Because we have none. We don't have no lunch. He said, oh, the government gives you food stamps. I'm like, what is that? He said, well, you take these stamps, you go to the grocery store, and they give you grocery. Man, I thought I'd discover America. I couldn't wait to see my dad when he got home from work.
Dad, we got free food.
Now, my dad, who came from being very wealthy, was working at J. Byron's, like J.C. Penney's, as a janitor, 85 cents an hour. I said, Dad, you know how I tell you that my friend has a sandwich? And my dad he nodded, yes. He said that his family gets food stamps. I said, Dad, do you know about food stamps? He goes, yes. I said, Dad, why don't we get food stamps? He's like, because, son, that's for poor people. And I'm like, holy shit, we're not even poor yet? We got to work our way out of poverty? You got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
I said, Dad, we're not poor? He said, no, son, we just don't have money. You get up early in the morning and help feed your family. I was 10, skinny as a rail. And I've been working since 5:30 in the morning all my life.
Yeah.
That's the type of principle my dad gave us.
Yeah.
You know, you can make it. Work hard.
Mm-hmm.
If someone's working 10 hours, work 14. Work 16.
Yeah.
Like I told my kids, all my kids are very successful. I've always told them since they were little, do what others won't, and you'll get to do what others can't.
Yeah.
You know?
And that is a gift what he gave you. We're not poor, we're just broke right now.
Biggest gift.
However, I would argue that you were traumatized by that poverty, and I think it contributed to the choices that you would make a little later on.
Well, you know, I sold to what I believe to be the American dream. So 2 days in America, my cousin drives up with the most beautiful car I had ever seen. It was an orange, candy apple red, white interior GTO. And I looked at that car and I said to myself, 10 years old, the day I get that card, I made it in America.
Wow.
And, you know, for the next 2-3 years, I realized one thing. You know, back then, a lot of Cubans couldn't even go to the bathroom that the white people went to the bathroom in Miami.
Right.
The racism was horrific. I don't think much has changed. But anyway, the interesting thing was that I was so focused that I was going to make it, because that was the American dream that we kept seeing, right? If you have this car, you need another car. You have this house. If you got this woman, you need another one. On and on. You got to have to be happy. That's why when I wrote that article, I Want to Die, is because I reached the zenith of what any human being can reach. And I realized it's not there. That ain't the American dream. The American dream of the World War II generation, the greatest generation, who did not believe in the war, but felt that going to war was an honor, had marriage problem, but divorce was not an option. They wanted, you know, were honest, they worked hard, they saved, had a little house, they retired, they raised their kids, and all that mattered was truth, honor, and integrity.
But the boomers, in contrast, was driven by materialism. And,
Totally.
And that's what's so interesting about your story, the duality of going from this highly educated, spiritual, religious environment in Cuba to now the most materialistic place on earth, Miami. And so you have competing values you know, what you see in the home and what you learn from your parents and your outside influences. And that got the better of you. And I think we can all kind of understand that, even though you made your choices and they were wrong in hindsight. But I certainly have empathy for what happened to you.
Right.
So,
no, and it is because I was driven. See, I knew one thing. I knew I would never be accepted. I would always be an immigrant. I knew that. Even my children who were born here. But I knew one thing. I was going to make them respect me.
that's right. That's right.
And that's what drove me. Yeah. That's what drove me to work at the age of 17 at the Federal Reserve Bank, full-time, and go to University of Miami full-time. Had no life. No life for 4 years.
Okay, so let's talk about this. So you're 17. Things are turning around for your family. They're getting a little better. Your dad owns a little business. And you are in high school still when you're taking college courses. And you get a job working at the Federal Reserve Bank. Can you tell us what that is? Because when most people hear Federal Reserve Bank, we think about the central bank in Washington. What is the Federal Reserve Bank of Miami? What is that?
So when we came from New Jersey, I had enough credits to finish high school in 3 years. But Florida requires English for 4 years. So while I was taking my English class to finish my high school, I was already attending, at that time in Miami-Dade, and then transferred to University of Miami. So my first job was a gentleman that was the first supervisor my father had when we came from Cuba. Now he was a lieutenant at the Federal Reserve Bank. The Federal Reserve Bank is the banking machine of the United States. It's the central bank of the United States. So basically, every bank has to have deposits with the Federal Reserve Bank, and that's how they control monetary policy, right?
Yeah.
And we see a lot, maybe people know more about it now because of all the deal with Jerome Powell and interest rates being high. So they literally control the economy by the tools they have to raise, interest rates and to have, the money that every bank has to keep X amount of money in deposit.
Right.
With the Federal Reserve Bank, right? So they control that deposit rate, and that's how they control the economy. And this guy's a genius. He's done an unbelievable job.
I just didn't know there were different branches of it.
Yeah, so it's all over the United States. So the main office is in Washington, D.C. Yeah. Then we have one in Miami. I believe we had another one in Jacksonville. Then in New Orleans and New York, and different cities. And that's what you call Federal Reserve Bank presidents.
Right.
And he is the chairman. He is the Fed chair. He's the chairman of all those presidents.
Okay.
So I was the youngest employee, 17. I started in check collection, and then I went on to the accounting department, and they were paying for my. I was on full scholarship at the University of Miami, and the Federal Reserve Bank was paying for my tuition also. So I was making money every semester.
Right.
And I had a tremendous career. I was convinced I could become Fed president one day.
Yeah.
There was no doubt about it. I mean, I was just going right through the ranks like nothing.
And that was the plan.
And that was the plan for me. I was gonna work really, really hard, save money to go, because back then there was no student loans, right? So that's another thing. So I was gonna save enough money to go to law school. I'm gonna graduate from law school by the age of 23, and by 30 I'm gonna be a millionaire. And that was my focus. I didn't go to parties. I didn't drink alcohol. I never smoked a cigarette in my life. I never smoked marijuana in my life. Didn't do drugs. Did nothing. I was actually...
You never even been with a woman.
And I had never even had sex. I had to join a drug cartel to be able to have sex. So, but the interesting thing is that I was a nerd. I had braces. I mean, when I went to Tallahassee, the first prison I went to, they janked my braces off. I mean, if you look in the internet, in the dictionary back then, picture of a nerd, that was me.
Yeah.
You look at it.
Yeah, glasses.
And all my friends are like, oh man, let's go party. You're wasting your life. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm very focused on what I am. Yeah. I'm not wasting my life. I'm doing something. Same as when I went back to prison. Inmate said, hey, sleep 12 hours. You sleep half of your sentence. Yeah. I'm like, that's stupid. I sleep 12 hours. I'll sleep half of my life away.
That's right.
So I decided I'm just going to become better and earn another bachelor's and all like that. So I was very, very focused on success. And because at the same time, we all have an innate need to be respected, right? We see it in the inner city with the kids and the gangs and all that, It's everybody wants to belong.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be part of a family. Everybody wants to be important, And I knew that the only way I would be somebody in America wasn't because I had degrees on was how much money I had.
That's right. So your things are shaping up to all come true. You start basically, I believe, a side business, an accounting service already as you're working for the Feds.
I was still doing it when I was working for the First Reserve Bank. I was doing it out of the basement, not the basement. My bedroom at that time was a one-car garage divided in half. My brother had one half, I had the other half, and we had a wall in between because my brother's a mess. I adore my brother; he's my best friend in the whole world. And then and my sister, who was 13, would do the accounting for me.
Yeah, she was working for you.
Yeah, and I'd go visit on the weekends.
So you're doing the books, you're doing the accounting for other Hispanic businesses.
Little business, right? Little grocery stores in Miami.
Yeah. And this is where fate starts to come together. Take it over from here. How did this lead to you first meeting, Colombians that were washing money?
My first accounting professor at the University of Miami, a guy named Jackson Hay, he came to me when I was graduating, and he's like, "Hey, leave the bank, come work for me." He was a partner of Price and Waterhouse in Michigan, Detroit, I believe, and they have moved and opened an office in Miami. And he said, "Look, if you do my Spanish clients," because he and his partner did not speak Spanish, "if you do my Spanish clients, I'll give you an office. You can have your secretary, copy machine, all the stuff I only dreamed I could have one day, right?"
Copy machine?
Yeah.
Wow.
Everything, And all I had to do was his Spanish clients. Right. And I have my own business,
right,
which is what, I've always dreamed of. My father was adamant against it. My father's like, "No, you got a great job, a tremendous future." My mother is, "Son, you're never going to be anybody but working for somebody. Go for it. And if you fail, you can start again. You can get a job anywhere the way that you have been prepared."
So listen to that. So your mother is the one who told you to leave the Fed, this secure thing where you would have been president and making a cool 7 figures. She's the one that told you to go into business for yourself that eventually led to you being a drug lord.
Totally against
the irony.
The irony. And I never even thought about that, which is so ironic.
Do you think she ever blamed herself?
No, I don't think she ever
put that together.
She was, the greatest thing about my mom was, and I've done this with my kids, and I tell this to parents, there's tremendous power in words. Whatever I told my mother I wanted to do, she would look at me and say, "Son, you're going to be the best." "Mom, I want to be a carpenter like my father." Now imagine, we lived in a mansion in Cuba. My father was selling furniture, living room sets at that time that were $10,000, $20,000 in the 60s. My mother said, "You want to be a carpenter?" No problem. She moved literally all the furniture out of the living room and let me set up a shop for about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be a carpenter like my dad. I wanted to make beds. I wanted to make, just an 8-year-old, 9-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And baseball player, you're going to be the best baseball player, whatever. And I grew up believing that.
Yeah.
And no matter what I did, I was going to be the best.
Yeah.
I had no doubt. And it's very important for parents because I've seen the opposite. I've seen parents tell their kids they're a piece of shit, they're nothing, they're worthless, and they grew up believing that, no matter how brilliant they are.
I know, and they become podcasters. So let that be a lesson to all you parents out there. And you really became the best, even when it came to cocaine.
Hey guys, let me take a minute to tell you about our new sponsor, Mudwater. I love these guys. So I am addicted to caffeine, like most of you probably are. I drink it in the morning and then in the afternoon when I feel that caffeine come down. The problem is when I pound a coffee at 3:30 or 4 p.m., I can't get to bed at night and I'm sweating and I'm jittery. And caffeine addiction is no joke. And that's where Mudwater comes in to solve that. Okay, I love this stuff. It's basically helped me cut down on my caffeine intake to where I'm like 1 cup in the morning and that's it. Mudwater is packed with cacao, chai, lion's mane, chaga, reishi, cordyceps, turmeric, and cinnamon. Mudwater gives you a smooth energy boost without the heart racing jitters. The way I would describe it is not as gnarly as coffee, but not as light as tea. It still has the coffee texture. It feels like you're drinking a cup of coffee, the way the sensations in your mouth, even the smell of it. It's hot like coffee, but it's not like tea. So if you love coffee, you're addicted to coffee, you don't want to use tea as a way to wean yourself off coffee, Mudwater is the perfect solution. Try it today and save big. our listeners get up to 43% off your entire order, free shipping, and a free rechargeable frother. What? All of that just for signing up? Head to Mudwater, MUDWTR.com and use the code Mitchell at checkout. Once again, that's 43% off all of that stuff I just listed, your order, free shipping, and a free rechargeable frother when you head to MUDWTR.com and use that code Mitchell at checkout. And now Mudwater is available at Target and Sprout locations across the US, so it's never been easier to grab a cup of this winter-friendly pick-me-up. Yeah, you guys have seen this stuff. It is blowing up as a coffee substitute. It is the only thing for me, and actually I drink it more now than I drink actual coffee. So I cannot recommend this product enough. I love it too because there's also no sugar and no sweeteners added. To use Mudwater, you simply drop the powder into your favorite mug, pour some water on it, and give it a mix. There's also caffeine-free blends as well. Ready to make the switch to cleaner energy? Head to mudwater.com, MUDWTR.com, and grab your starter kit today. And again, that discount is insane. 43% off when you use the code Mitchell, MITCHELL, at mudwater.com. After your purchase, do me a favor. They'll ask you how you found them. Please show your support and let them know that we sent you here on The Connect. Keep your energy refreshing and natural all year long with Mudwater, because life's too short for anything less than clean, delicious energy. Today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. You guys, it's the new year, and how do you want to remember your 2025? What do you want to change? What do you want to implement that's going to improve your life? It all starts with your mental health. I know that for a fact. I was very reluctant to go into therapy for obvious reasons. I don't like confessing. You guys know my past. I don't like telling an authority figure my secrets. But guess what? That is what a therapist is there for, okay? And the burden of finding therapy, of actually getting a recommendation, getting in your car, driving to a therapist's office, that's all very daunting. Well, thank God for BetterHelp. BetterHelp is fully online, making therapy affordable and convenient and serving over 5 million people worldwide. You have access to a diverse network of more than 30,000 credentialed therapists with a wide range of specialties. And it's easy to switch. If you meet a therapist that you don't jibe with, it is as simple as a couple of button clicks, and BetterHelp will pair you with somebody that is more suitable to your specific needs. So get on it, guys. Trust me. Everybody that I know now is using BetterHelp. It's kind of revolutionized therapy, especially for bros like me. We never used to go to therapy, partly because we hate the hassle of it. This has revolutionized therapy. And everybody that I know has a therapist now, and they've got them through BetterHelp, okay? And trust me, it's really affordable. That's what I love about it. So what you're going to do is visit betterhelp.com/connect and get 10% off your first month. Once again, that's BetterHelp, HELP, betterhelp.com/CONNECT for 10% off your first month. All right, you guys, let's get back into the episode.
So, wow. So fate has taken you down the road of now you're got your own office. I think it's in like a retail space in Miami, right?
I had an office at the accounting offices of Jack Snee and his partner. And then the first client they asked me to do for them was a little grocery store in Miami. You know, a little strip mall, not where they have strippers. That's how they call them, Miami strip malls. And it was just a little grocery store. And I walked in there. I was supposed to, they were going to pay me $1,000 a month for going every Monday. And I thought, like, wow, I hit a jackpot. I had, like, back then, I think minimum wage was like $1.80, and I was making almost $4 at the Federal Reserve Bank. So I was, like, rich, according to people. And I'm driving a Chevrolet Vega with a big old hole in the side. The only air conditioner was 280, lower the windows and hit 80. So I walk in there, and but I was so freaking innocent, man. I walk in there, the first day was like, I don't know, a couple $100,000. Forgot $100,000. And I'm like, okay. So I count all the money, I count all the receipts, I opened up ledgers, did all that for him, and went to Barnett Bank and deposited the money. Next Monday, I come in another astronomical 75, 8, whatever. Altogether, I think it was over 300,000 in 3 weeks. Finally, the third week, I had to ask him, I'm like, look, there's no way. I just deposited $300,000 this month, but I've also only written checks for about $2,000 to $3,000 worth of merchandise. I said, in America, you buy a can of Campbell soups for $1, you sell it for $3, and you make $2 profit.
Yeah.
Here we're making hundreds of thousands of profit. We're not selling any Campbell soups.
Yeah.
And I mean, just straight out, they looked at me and they're like, we're drug dealers.
And these are Colombians?
Yeah, Colombian. This is just a front. And I'm like, and then immediately asked me, do you know how to open foreign bank accounts? So I knew from the Federal Reserve Bank how you open foreign bank accounts and where, because of the different audits that had happened, where people had, at that time, Cayman Island. Later on, I started with Tortola. You hear all these people talk about all the stuff that they've done in the past. And, I like to see the receipts. I like to see the proof. But they asked me if I could, and I said, yeah. And I opened 3 in Grand Cayman. And at that time, called me 750. I told them 10,000. They said, we want 3. And then I'm like, that was like my big payday.
Wow.
$30,000. And I'm like, wow.
Just to open these accounts.
Open those accounts.
So you started off, you kind of reverse engineered it. Your drug career began with money laundering.
Yeah. And at that time, there was no money laundering. Remember? There was no money laundering until the 80s.
Right. They didn't even call it money laundering.
No, there was no such thing. And I could walk into a bank. The way that you see the movie Scarface with Tony Montana walking in with those paper bags, that's how we did. After 3 o'clock, I'd give the bank president $1,000. He thought he sold the freaking moon, and he deposited a couple hundred to $300,000, whatever it was.
So you'd march in there with burlap or sacks filled with
duffel bags,
hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And he'd have one cashier after 4 o'clock, and then he'd count all the money. And then that's how it was. And it was because at that time, there was no stigma about cocaine. And amongst us, nobody used, right? So I walked in there, and I started doing that. But these people were literally like what you would consider the local office for the big guys that went on to become a group named the Medellín Drug Cartel.
Okay. So this is 1974, 75.
1976.
Okay. So 76 is when you're 20. That's actually when you joined the cartel, when you started with them. So let's paint this era, because there's a lot of misconceptions about the Medellín Cartel, about the evolution of cocaine trafficking from Medellín to Miami. Who were the first people, the OGs, the originators of cocaine trafficking in Miami?
In Miami, if we were to classify in large quantities, right? What I consider large quantity, 600 kilos, right? That's enormous. There was, let me retract and I'll get to that. So they asked me, that the 2 husband and wife who were running the little grocery store, to meet their partner, their bosses. And that's where I met Manny Garces. I met Manny Garces. I met Jorge Ordóñez. I met 2 other gentlemen, right? Julio Armando and Carlos Botero. Nobody heard about those people back then. And I was the 5th. They asked me, they wanted to start a shipping company because they wanted to start importing bananas from Colombia. If I was willing to open this company, and I did, I was the president. We started a banana company called Uniplat, Union of Plataneros, and we went to California to buy this cargo ship landing craft, what it was, that you can just come up to shore. The military used to use it to come up to shore and offload their military equipment, right? Well, for them, it was great because they could come, it had real low draft, and this area of Colombia called Turbo, they can go in there and load up the map. I had no freaking clue that these people had no interest in selling bananas, that all they wanted to do was bring in cocaine.
Now, you're a sharp guy, though. You knew that in your early money laundering days that you were opening up bank accounts for Colombian drug dealers. You must have suspected, surely, that these 4 gentlemen were involved in that.
I knew that group of gentlemen, and then when they enlisted me at the end of 76, that 5 is the group that later on would become known as part of the Medellín Drug Cartel.
Right.
There was no Medellín Drug Cartel till the 80s. You see Griselda, you see a lot of stuff. If you really want to see the most accurate depiction that I myself can tell you, I was there when it all began, was Billy Corbin's Cocaine Cowboy Kings of Miami. They probably know more about that era than anybody else because they lived there. They're young filmmakers. They lived that era. Billy's best friend going to baseball games. His father was one of the, one of the most notorious attorneys in Miami. They know that. The funny thing is that now everybody's a kingpin, right? Everybody started the cocaine traffic. Everybody's a genius. Everybody, and it's all BS. How do I tell people? I never told people how much cocaine I ever brought in. That's stupid. Why is there out there people saying that I brought in 85% of all the cocaine that came into America? Because the United States government said that. I didn't say it. Right. I would never say that. Like people that I see get up there and said, oh, I didn't bring in 70 tons. I brought in 700 tons. I said, I think you're stupid for saying that. I mean, why would you even say that? I wouldn't even say it to myself. The interesting thing about it is that it started in a very different way. It started by 4 people that were not what you consider typical narcos or anything like that.
No, these aren't gangsters.
Businessmen. Yeah. Everyone was a businessman.
And they're all these 4 gentlemen. Manny is the most significant.
Manny's the boss.
I want people to remember the name Manny because he is a central figure in your life and your trafficking career. Manny is the boss, but these guys, all from Medellín, Colombia, did they set out to Miami to open up the cocaine markets, or were they just there as immigrants?
No.
How did
they have businesses in Miami. There was a big case in '78. Video Canary, you see it on Cocaine Cowboys, right? Where they arrested just about anyone that was dealing cocaine in Miami, right? Right towards the end of 78, I believe. They never mentioned my name in that case at all. Now, go to 1979. 3 months later, 4 months later, I get arrested in Panama. I get kidnapped. I get tortured, et cetera, et cetera. We'll go into that. I'm brought to the United States. And the government, no one in that case, no one in those cases got over $50,000 bail, maybe $100,000. Out of all of them, the government asked for $7 million bail for me. Yeah. I'm 23 years old. All those people had been recorded. There was a guy in an apartment not in Brickell, in Coconut Grove, and he recorded everybody that came into his office. So there was recordings of everyone that got arrested. The government never ever had a picture of me, never had a recording of me. So they're asking for $7 million. They finally leave it at $3 million. 23-year-old kid, worked for the Federal Reserve Bank, college grad, never had a traffic ticket in my life. Why? Why would I get such a huge bail when Griselda never had that bail?
Right.
None of those people ever had that bail. Nobody. Why? Maybe perhaps the government knew more than what people tell narcos.
And I don't want to.
They're writing books.
And I hate to give this up because it's in your book, but it turns out that your lawyer was feeding the government information.
And I didn't even find out for 7 years. And I mean, this guy. So give you an idea. Mel Kessler was his name, right? Very notorious. Was probably the most famous drug lawyer in Miami in the 70s, right? And very flashy. He and I were like brothers. He came to my office one day to pick me up for lunch. We went out to lunch. I come back, and there was one of the hitmen that worked for some of my associates. But I had known him from Colombia, right? He was waiting in my office. And he was like, don't ever get in a car with anybody again. His name was Victor. I said, why? I said, I had a bomb underneath the car. Because Mel had screwed his boss's brother, told him to come to the United States, that everything was fine, that he arranged everything. And when the guy came, he got arrested and went to prison. So I saved his life. And he knows because I'm the one that called the guy that put the hit. And I asked him, look, as a personal favor to me, take it off and how much. And I paid it for him. And I told Mel, all of this, I never knew a lot of different things. Number one, why didn't Mel not represent me when I was paying him thousands of dollars prior? Why did Mel stay away from me? Why, when my brother was going to take the money to Panama to get me out, why did Mel tell my brother to go with somebody else because you're going to get arrested? How do you know that? All right. And at that meeting, it was Willie Falcone and Sam Magluta and another gentleman, Randy Sosa. And the first person, my brother told me that the first person to jump up and said, I'll go with him, was Sam Magluta. Everybody else?
Yeah, you should have seen the writings on the wall with your lawyer. You know, this is the...
but imagine, he and I were like brothers.
Yeah.
I would have never believed in a million years that this guy would ever rat me out.
So let's get back really quick to the four who really are the four godfathers of cocaine in the United States. It's Manny and his associates.
Right.
They were Colombian immigrants who had legitimate businesses, and then they realized that this thing, cocaine, was about to be a huge business, and they got into it, it sounds like.
Yeah, Manny started in the marijuana. Manny started way back smuggling. He's been a smuggler all his life.
Right.
Very religious. Daily mass.
Right. Yeah, these aren't gangsters. These are
not gangsters, man.
These are very like upscale, old school mafioso. They really are gentlemen.
Yeah.
And
so they saw that marijuana was very bulky to handle. You had a lot of people. So a lot of people were getting arrested in Miami at that time. And you could make so much more with cocaine. And really, they stumbled into it with cocaine because nobody ever thought that there was going to become this cocaine craze in 1976, 77 in Miami.
Right.
That was unbelievable, you know?
Yeah.
And really, it wasn't even in Miami because people talk about like all that. The cocaine craze started in California because out of the 600 kilos that I received every week or every month, one day of the month, I'm not going to say what day of the month because someone else is claiming he received them, and I want to ask him what day did he receive them. But anyway, those kilos that came in used to come in this big Caterpillar engines, right? Inside a drum, inside those engines. I would send 3/4 of it to California.
Right.
Because California was paying me $70,000.
Right.
Miami was $45,000 wholesale.
Right. So, because in California, coke was so expensive in these early days that California, you know, it was the craze amongst the elite movie stars.
Oh, the demand was unbelievable.
They're sucking it all up. So that was the primary market at the very beginning.
The biggest market, I would say 70% of the cocaine that came into America went to California.
Wow. Now, who were if Manny and crew are the biggest, are the bosses in the United States, who is their connect in Colombia? Is it anybody and everybody? Or who is the original family that was supplying the United States?
So in Colombia, so these were the original families from Colombia that controlled the cocaine trade, that sold it in the United States, okay? Till 1980, Colombia did not produce any cocaine. Colombia, all the cocaine, all the paste came from Bolivia and Peru. Colombia, what they would do is crystallize it and make it into cocaine. So Manny and them would have people go to Bolivia and to Peru and bring it over, crystallize it in Colombia, and then they would ship it to the United States.
Oh, so they were literally vertically integrated.
Yeah. Vertically,
okay. Because later on,
there was not a single family that could. If you want to call a single family to control, or one that control a major amount of cocaine, I would say it was Roberto Suarez in Bolivia.
Tell us about him.
So Roberto Suarez is the guy that you saw in Scarface that comes and kills Tony Montana.
That's Sosa.
Right. Yeah. So Roberto Suarez, he was our partner. We went when I went to do a deal that I got busted in Panama, in Bolivia, was with Roberto Suarez, and he was the king of cocaine. He was the guy that controlled all the fields and all the cocaine fields and the cocoa leaves. You know, the cocoa leaves back then were used a lot by the farmers. They would chew it so that it give them energy to work and all that. So he was the first to really be able to create. He overthrew 4 governments.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the entire Bolivian government back then was a narco state. He controlled it. The military was all.
I mean, the general that was the intermediary between him and us It was a general named Coca. That was his last name.
Unbelievable.
General
Perfect.
Coca.
Was he also crystallizing it, or did that all happen? Why do you think
that all happened in Colombia?
Why do you think it was the Colombians that were the first to take the business international, to take it, turn it into crystal, and blow it up as a final end product, as cocaina?
You know,
why didn't the Bolivians do it, or the Peruvians? What do you think it is
it's
about
a good
them?
question. I would imagine later on, because the interesting thing is that in 1979, or 1980, the end of 79, because I went back to prison. I went to prison. I got arrested in 79. I was in prison for 6 months. Then I finally got bail for 3 months. And then I got convicted in February of 80. I went back to prison. At that time is when the cocaine totally changed from Colombia and all that. Prior to that era, it's a good question. And honestly, I have no clue why Bolivians didn't do that.
My theory is balls. Colombians got
Colombia,
balls.
you know, I love Colombia. My wife is Colombian, so my children are half Colombian, and Manny, who is my father, literally raised me. I was just a kid. But man, they are the most innate gangsters. I mean, they control the counterfeit trade.
Right.
You know, everything that had to do with anything, they were adults.
They're criminals.
They're very innate. They got very ingenious entrepreneurial skills.
That's right.
Unfortunately, sometimes for the forbidden product.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Manny's crew is basically through the Bolivians. They're basically have their own labs in Colombia that are sending the end product to Miami.
Yeah. And there was all kinds of people in Colombia setting up small labs and crystallizing, and Manny would buy from them, right? So we never, till I got arrested, till 1980, we never had a shipment that came in that was like, all from one place.
Right.
It was all kinds of different stuff.
Sure.
You know,
and I think that's important for people to know is like this, the government and history makes it seems like this was one giant organization. It was all, even back then, very bifurcated and independent. There was a ton of different groups getting in on the action. So now you, at 20 years old, are now brought in by Manny as an associate.
First of all, as the accountant and president of the shipping company.
That's right.
And the banana company. It wasn't until the end when I was about, towards the end of 76, beginning of 77, that I get put in charge of everything.
Now, why
the operations?
Why did it become that? Why didn't they just keep you as the accountant? Why did they actually bring you in?
The interesting thing is that Manny kept saying, I was happy with just doing that because I was making more money than I ever thought I would ever make. And I thought the banana and the shipping company could legitimately become a multi-million-dollar company.
Right.
I could, look, my wife is very creative, right? I can create nothing. I can paint a straight line. But I can see a business. Look, it's real simple. I never invented anything. I became a multi-millionaire in cocaine, and then I got a prison, they broke, didn't have nothing, and in 10 years I built a multi-million-dollar company. Didn't invent nothing. I got certain principles that I use and that I have learned from my father and set it through our life, and I have a vision for business. I can see a business and say, yeah, that's going to work or not work. And, I asked Manny in my interview for my documentary coming out next year, Shadow of the Wolf, what did you see in me? Why? Because he kept putting this pressure. I want you to handle everything for me. And here's where he said, look, I saw a young kid that was very honest, very educated, very disciplined, and I thought he could become a right-hand man.
Wow. And that's exactly
what
happened.
What he did. And
so you also had made contacts with cocaine customers in California. You were the first one out of these Colombian guys to do that.
And that's how I even get started with Manny.
Yeah,
exactly. How I made that jump.
Yeah. You had an account.
I was out there overseeing the refrigeration of the boat. Okay. And I met the guy doing the refrigeration for me. It was about my age. Mm-hmm. I was 21 years old and a really good guy. And I was living in Stockton, California for 8 months. And he kept saying, hey, I know this is a cocaine boat. And I'm like, no, it's not.
Right.
And, since I played baseball a lot, I played with his softball team. I would go to barbecues at his house, became a very, very close friend. And he kept harassing me. I know it is. Finally, I asked a guy that worked at the grocery store, right? I asked him, I said, hey, how much is cocaine? I mean, how much does cocaine sell for? And he's like, well, in Colombia, it cost at that time 23. And
2,300?
23,000.
23,000 a key in Colombia?
In 1977. Wow. Then it went down to 21 and 18.
And then 45,000 in Miami,
and
right?
And then, 45,000 in Miami. But, so it's 21, and then it was 5,000, usually the cost to transport it. So, figure at that time 28, and they were selling for 45,000. So I'm going to get rid of this guy. I'm just going to get rid of Mel. His name was Mel, once and for all. And he finally comes up, and when he hits me again, hey, come on, man. I know this is going to be a cocaine boat. I said, you're right, man. We're cocaine dealers. Now, we're close enough. We've known each other now for months. And yeah, we are. And I said, but we only handle the best. I have no clue. I had never seen cocaine. I don't know. I couldn't tell the difference between sugar, cotton, and cocaine. And he said, well, can you sell me some? I said, how many you want? He says, I start out with 10 or 30. What's the price? I said, 70,000. I just threw a price to get the guy to leave me alone, to just stop bugging me, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. And he comes back and he says, I'll take 10. And I'll take 30 the next time. And I went back and told, at that time, I didn't even have the guts to tell Manny. I told Luis, the guy running the grocery store. I said, hey, you want to do this? He said, this guy says he wants to do it. And he's like, oh, hell yeah. I'll take him out there myself. And that's how we got started. That's how I got started in that.
Does it occur to you that not only did you open up a whole new market for cocaine in the United States, you literally set the market price for cocaine? You just made up a number.
In California, I said.
And that was the price.
And listen, I don't like to name names, especially of innocent people, because even though they're dead, they got family and kids. But I have sat with the most famous movie stars, most famous models, most famous artists in California, and seeing them pay $70,000 to our distributor there for 2-3 kilos. And I was blown away. I'm like, what the f- these people doing?
So now your price, once it lands in Miami, is $28,000. That's the buy price, including the freight, which is how you guys refer to the transport. And now you're moving them to California for $70,000. So you're profiting $42,000 a kilo. And you're, I think, moving what, 600 a week?
We're doing 600 a month is what we're getting in Miami.
I see.
But that's towards probably the following year. We started out 30, 40 because they started out bringing it like in banana boats, real banana boats that were coming, cruise ships, stuff like that. Right?
Commercial flights.
Right.
And
Pilots, they would bring 10 kilo, 15, 20 kilo.
So it was very piecemeal at the beginning.
But within 7 months, 8 months is when suddenly Manny tells me, here's this contact. He's going to call you a certain day of the month at 5 o'clock in the morning. He's going to deliver you a big old U-Haul with this engines inside, and that averaged 600 kilos.
Right, just in one.
And at that time, out of 600 kilos, we were sending 400 to California. At that time, we lowered in California the price to 65,000.
Okay. So, and then the rest of the cocaine was just given to you. Whoever the Colombians wanted to give it to in Miami, it was your job to make sure they got it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And were those Colombians as well?
Yeah, everyone was Colombian.
So were you the only Cuban at the beginning to be working with the Colombians?
At that time, with this group, I was the only one.
Wow, okay.
And the Cubans that worked for me, that worked with me.
Now, how did the smuggling start to evolve besides the, putting them in these big engines that would come through customs? Was Manny primarily the one that was responsible for kind of evolving that and perfecting that part of the business?
So 77, 78, all of that's strictly how all the cocaine I got in the United States came in that day of the month. Again, I don't want to say the day because I want to know if the people that claim they received that day, I want to know what day. Anyway, that day of the month, and that was it. That was our only source at that time. Now, I started to develop a route through Bolivia. And I had an opportunity, and that was really my downfall, because when I went to Manny, he says to me, why? You're making millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Well, we were going to be able in Bolivia, the deal I worked out with the guy that represented Suarez was, for every kilo that we bought at 10,000, they will give us a kilo on credit.
Right.
So we're going to make, $7 million a month profit.
Right.
And unfortunately, or fortunately for me, thank God, I got it. So back then there was not airplane commercial flights as often. So I was in Colombia with the pilots, showing them the strip where they're going to refuel in Colombia. Then we were going to go to Corn Island, where Somoza, who I had a deal with, had given us an airstrip, and then we're coming to the United States. Well, I was only going to show the strip in Colombia, and then I was going to go to Nicaragua. And then after I had my meeting with Somoza, I was getting on a jet, and I was headed to Europe.
Hold on. You had a meeting with Somoza of Nicaragua?
I had a meeting with General Somoza. I was supposed to have a meeting with General Somoza when we never arrived in Nicaragua.
Okay, so you were so you actually never met him. You never had a meeting.
He was going to allow us to bring in kilos of cocaine to Nicaragua, and he had a big wholesaling fish company that he was owner, and in those diplomatic containers that were going to send it to the United States.
What was his end going to be? What did he want out of that?
I would imagine, I don't know, but I knew it was going to be a lot.
Right.
I figured at that time, we figured that any president we dealt with, we give him $500,000 a load.
Right.
Right. So,
and what kind of volume did you expect to get with this air route?
We're going to bring in 300 kilos every month.
Okay.
And I mean, that was like, that's not the route with Nicaragua. This was the route from Bolivia, Colombia, Nicaragua, into the United States. But here's the thing, 300 kilo, we're only putting up 150, 1.5 million.
Right.
And getting another 1.5 on credit. Right. Now you take that 10,000, and it was going to cost me $6,000 is what I was paying the pilot, because I hired a whole crew, because Manny would not let me have any of our transportation. I hired this whole crew through Mel Kessler.
Yeah,
introduced me to a guy named Harold Rosenthal, and so we were going to have $16,000 a kilo in the United States already.
So you're making, and you basically stood to make a $50,000 profit per
on
kilo.
Each one, and half of them were on credit. Didn't even have to have our own money.
That's incredible, because 300 kilos now is like kind of small potatoes. These are like 1,000 kilo loads. But the difference is the price was so high back then that you could make off of 300 kilos what it would take somebody now flipping 2,000 kilos to make.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a lot more. So, but what ended up happening, so I was at the airstrip in Colombia when I called Sal, because Sal was in Bolivia waiting for the airplane. When I called Sal to ask him, to tell him that the airplane was leaving that next day, and he told me, hey, they f*** you. The money, the kilos that they were supposed to have on credit, they don't have them on credit. The only thing is here, I had taken $1,300,000. All they had was 130 kilos that you paid for. So I decided I'm going to go on the airplane to Bolivia and strain them out. Here's a 22-year-old kid, a punk.
Yeah.
I hadn't even turned 20. I had just turned 23 2 weeks earlier.
And you had braces.
Yeah.
And
so I'm going to go straight out a guy that's overthrown 4 governments, right? That's how crazy you become. Well, got to Bolivia. They told, hey, listen, the next load, and I thank God it was providential, because I would have ended up owing, 131.3 million because it went down. But they ended up saying, hey, the next load will give you the whole 300 kilos on credit. Yeah. So everything was fine. So now I didn't have enough time to get on a commercial flight to Nicaragua to make my meeting with Somoza. So I ended up saying, I'll just go on the airplane.
Yeah.
Nothing can happen.
Which was a mistake. You went on the plane with the coke in it.
Yeah. And when we got to Colombia, and Manny saw me on the airplane at that airstrip, he went nuts.
Yeah, he was furious. He didn't want you anywhere near the work.
I had never been around it.
Yeah.
So he went nuts. And I'm like, Manny, nothing's going to happen to me. And So I got on the airplane, and unfortunately, both alternators were out. We couldn't get the jet fuel out of the inside. We have bladders inside to give us the distance from Bolivia to Colombia, and then from Nicaragua we were coming to Fernandina Beach right here in Florida. So we didn't have enough fuel, and when both alternators went out, we crashed over the jungles of Panama. We went down at 5,000 feet.
Did you think, were you free falling or were you gliding?
Oh, yeah. No, we glided for a while, but after a while, you don't glide anymore, right?
You
go down. Yeah. You can see the pictures, the DA picture. The airplane is, we thought we'd die. There was no way. We'd crash and all that fuel would just blow up.
Yeah.
So
you buried the keys. You
didn't bury them because we had to jump off the airplane. So we knew no one, unless they brought a ladder, they couldn't get inside the airplane to see.
Right.
My mistake was, and I had a briefcase with $150,000 that I always carry with me, right? It was a Samsonite that had a false bottom. My mistake was not telling that little lieutenant in that little town, hey, listen, man, we got drugs here. Here's $20,000. I'm going to have some people come and pick it up tomorrow.
Right.
That was my mistake.
Yeah.
Because he saw us, and I gave him a couple $100 to take me to a hotel. We gave him my passports so that he would stamp them like we had just come in legally, right?
Right.
And basically what we're going to we're going to go to Costa Rica, which was literally, less than 100 miles away, because we had given $1 million to the president of Costa Rica to become president. And he had just become president, Jorge Valdez.
Your organization paid him that?
Yeah, $1 million. So
does history know that?
Well, I mentioned it 2 or 3 times, but, remember now, I wrote my first book in 1998. And I didn't go into a lot of detail because the purpose of writing the book was not to tell this autobiography or how big I was or anything like that. It was basically to tell my kids who I was. Mm-hmm. And to get my ex-wife to quit threatening me that she was going to tell the university and everybody who I was. My whole purpose, my whole thought in life was no one's going to know my past. I got a PhD. I'm respected. I'm a college professor. I'm going to have a bunch of pretty girls begging me for an A. Life is wonderful, right? The big snitch had not been born. Google.
Yeah, right.
So nobody would have known. But
was the point of paying off all these Latin American dictators and presidents so that you could use them for if you needed favors?
No, and we could open laboratories. We can open because this was just the beginning of an explosive era that I did not see.
So you gave the Costa Rican president $1 million just because you knew in the future.
For his campaign, I knew a very close friend of mine who introduced me to ministers of finance because he was a member of the World Bank. This Costa Rican, very close friend of mine that was in our payroll, and he was backing the campaign of Jorge Valdez. So we gave him $1 million for the campaign, and he did. He introduced with me the Minister of Finance in Tortola at that time, a guy named Cyril Rodney, and that's how I met all these people, all this foreign bank account that I opened.
Wow.
Through that gentleman.
Now, what about Noriega?
So when I get arrested in Panama, what ended up happening when they sent the passport to get to Panama City said, the DA had a hold on him. Panama City said, arrest him. He's one of the most notorious drug lords in the world today. Right. How did they know that? My attorney. He had been arrested by bribing a judge and was trading me for that judge. So long story, the attorney general come to see me. See, recently someone else told the story how it went, but I can tell you the story how it really went because I was there and my brother took the money. The attorney general came to see me the next day. And I said, don't waste my money, my time, or your time. How much money to get out and how much money to buy the coke back? And he said, $250,000 for you 4 to get out. And the cocaine, Noriega already sold it. This was 2 days after being arrested.
So Noriega took the coke that was in the plane that crashed and it already sold it off.
Yeah, that's why they didn't have a gram of it in the court in the U.S.
Hey, kind of saved your ass in a way.
Yeah, they had a picture.
Yeah, right.
Which could have been from anything, right? So we arranged. I gave a number to this guy, this attorney, to call and said, in Miami, my family, my brother, so that he could bring the money over, and that's how it happened. So ended up being that actually Sal, my brother, and another guy brought the money over. They paid the money. So that attorney, so the attorney general sends me his private attorney, one of his closest friends. So that attorney comes and said, look, everything's been paid. They're going to take you to the city of Panama. They're going to rough you up a little bit. And they just stick to your story. Our story was that we were bringing in guns to fight the Sandinistas. That was our story. You know, I didn't know what was inside that airplane. So he comes and they're going to take you to Panama. My mistake again is I go back to the cell and I tell the two pilots and their boss, Harold Rosenthal, hey, it's all taken care of. We're going home. I already paid the attorney general and they're going to take us to Panama and they're going to rough us up a little bit and we're going home. All right, all cool. So sure enough, the next day they come, take us to Panama City, right? This is already after Sal and my brother had left Panama. So they take us there and they put us in a room. It was like, I don't know, maybe 12 feet wide by 30 foot long. Look, a big conference room, empty. 4 chairs against the wall. And we're handcuffed and we're there. The DA is there, the head of the G2, which is our intelligence agency in Panama. And they bring this kid, about 80 pounds, soaking wet. Looked like he was no more than 80 pounds soaking wet. He was 5'2", naked. Slammed him in the floor. And they took a broomstick and stuck it up his anus. And blood just splattered all over the place. They looked at us and said, we caught him with 50 pounds of marijuana. Now, mind you, we had already 200 some odd kilos of cocaine because we picked up coke in Colombia.
Imagine what's going in your ass.
The two pilots, this two big old 6'2", 6'3" Georgia boys, cracked quickly.
Right.
They're like,
they told the whole story.
We'll tell you. Not only we're not Sandinistas, Jorge Valdez is the biggest drug leader in America, and he bribed the attorney general. So here's the guy that could help me. Right. Now on the run.
Yeah.
So they took us to a dungeon, and for the next 15, 20 days, they tortured us 2-3 times a day till they would come and beat us till we would pass out, and then come again and beat us again, and and I was convinced that I was going to die.
Yeah, they nearly killed you, right?
Yeah.
It's shocking that they didn't actually. I think they were stomping on your head. They were breaking your...
Two things happened. Go back to the words of my parent. My dad used to always say to my brother and I when we were little, son, in life, you got no control whether you're rich or poor. And we're like, no, we can figure that out, right? At 10. Whether you're sick or healthy, dead or alive, there's only one thing in life you got absolute control, your word. And only you can break your word. And once you break it, you're not a man any longer. So that was drained into my head. So here I am with this guy getting beat over and over and over again. Now, mind you, I'm just a 23-year-old kid. I'm not a street kid. I grew up in poverty, but I wasn't in gangs or anything like that. So all of a sudden, and I think it was right after the time that they came and they put electricity to my testicles, and I jumped up about that high and passed out somehow. And I had this vision that I was shaving. And my son was just 6 months old at that time, but was like 5 or 6 in that vision. He comes home crying, looking at me. And I'm like, Georgie, why are you crying? He's like, Dad, because my friend said, my father's not a man. And Michael, I swear to you on every Bible today, that moment in time, I made a decision. I will die here, but I will not crack.
Wow. They were trying to get you to confess.
They asked Manny in my interview, did you think he would crack? He said, I was absolutely convinced he would not tell on anyone. But let me tell you something. No one has any idea how brutal those Latin American countries are and to what extent they go to get what they want out of you. And it takes, not that I was a very tough guy or nothing like that. It's just that I convinced myself that it was better to die than to live all my life in shame.
And you fought back. You were screaming at him.
Well, the guy that was arrested, that's the mistake they made. They left me in the cell with this guy. He was a real tough guy. I mean, he was a Jewish guy, American, but he was a colonel in the Colombian military forces.
Wow.
I mean, in the guerrillas.
Wow.
And he was a bondsman in Atlanta and Robert Kennedy called him to bond out Martin Luther King out. The guy was just an unbelievable guy, right? A true gangster, related to Meyer Lansky, and he would tell me, fight back. And I was like, fight back, man. We're handcuffed hands and feet. He says, spit on him, scream at him, talk to him. The more you fight back, the stronger you get. And that was the mistake. Had they separated us, I don't know if I would have just given up and died. Mm-hmm. Because there's just no way to explain. Mm-hmm. Unless you go through some, people say, oh, I can imagine how that feel like. No, I can imagine what a woman goes through when she has a baby. No, cannot imagine. Never had a baby. You have no idea. The mental, you're in a dungeon like Les Mis. Yeah. No light, no food, no bathroom, no water. You pee and poop. After the third day, since you didn't eat, because they didn't feed us for 17, 18 days, there's no, you don't have to even go to the bathroom, thank God. And they just come in, no light, dark, just a little dim light in the hallway, and they just beat you, merciless. And
you were, I think, urinating blood for years after that, right?
For 5 years, every time I piss.
Kidney damage.
I passed blood. And
so after about 3 weeks of this, which is unimaginable, this kind of torture, I think Noriega comes to your cell.
Well, what happened the last time they were coming to, my mission now, this last 3 days, my mission was to get killed. I just want them to kill me, get this over with, because I can't, I'm losing my mind. And there was a kid across the street, across the cells, and he spent all day licking the bar, young kid. And he had been there for 7 months and lost his mind. And I said, I don't want to ever be like that for my parents. I don't want to be that. I want to die. Just get, I was convinced at that time when I entered the world that I would die by 23 anyway. So kill me. It doesn't matter. So I told the guards tell Noriega that if he doesn't kill me, when I get out, he knows I got the power that I'm going to get him and I'm going to his wife and kids in front of him. I knew that would trigger it.
Yeah.
He came the next day laughing.
Yeah, right.
Somebody's laughing.
Yeah. And what's interesting is he was so dirty and so corrupt and a gigantic, one of the biggest drug traffickers of that era as the dictator, the president of Panama. But he was also taking money from the DEA.
Oh, yeah.
And he had to feed people.
He was on the payroll.
So he betrayed you. You said you were going to send money to him, I believe.
Well, he asked me, he walks in, he walks toward the cell, and he says, why are you threatening me? You paid the wrong guy.
Right.
And I said, how much? He said, $250,000.
Done.
I'm like, the same thing? I said, well, that was for 4. Now we got for 2, same price?
Yeah.
And we paid it, the next $250,000. And he says, where do you want to go? I said, Costa Rica. And he's like, all right, tomorrow you're going to Costa Rica. And he took us from the cell. They hosed us down with a fire hose, which hurt more than the torture, by the way. You're naked and they're hosing you down to get all the filth and crud off of you. And he's like, takes us to the airport. And I thought, wow, we made it. And literally, man, within 10 minutes, Interpol, 10 agents. Mm-hmm. Jorge Valdez, Harold Rosenthal. I said, who's asking? Interpol. Come with us. I said, no, I'm waiting for my plane. No, you're not. Your plane's over there. You're going to Miami.
And for the next 6-8 months, you're fighting your case.
So they bring me to Miami and they charge me. That's public record. People can read it. With heading the largest drug conspiracy in the history of America, 1979. The government asked $7 million bail. We settled on $3 million.
Yeah.
And told my attorney, we know he can post it, but if he posts it, we're going to take that money and raise the bail. We appealed it all the way up to Supreme Court. Mm. I had the best attorneys in the country. The chief judge of the Supreme Court said, or it was the third or the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal, which at that time was in New Orleans, said, this is their opinion. In this court's opinion, Mr. Valdez is a financial genius. He can move all around the world and we'll never be able to catch him again. Because I'm telling, look, I got companies in the United States. You know, I got roots, I got family, I got children. Mm. You know, there's no reason. At that time, you give a murderer a $100,000 bail. Why $3 million?
And of course, we know.
So
that it was your lawyer who was feeding them info.
So when I hear all these people talk about how big they were and how powerful they were and how they were the one, there's so many people that claim that they started the drug business in Miami. But I asked all of them, well, how come I never saw your bail be more than 100,000, 50,000? Or Griselda, if you were so powerful, how was it that the government let you out in 5 years? Would they have let Pablo Escobar out in 5 years? Mm. You know, when they come out and they said on the show with Griselda, there's only one person that Pablo Escobar feared, and her name was Griselda. I'm like, I know him personally for a long time. That's how bitch didn't fear the devil.
Mm. Okay, let's talk about that, because we have not, when people think of the Medellín Cartel and Colombian cocaine trafficking, they immediately think of Pablo Escobar and the Ochoas, and then Griselda in that order. What was your relationship with Pablo Escobar?
Well, here's the thing. So I never met Pablo till after I got out of prison.
Right.
I think I met him in Colombia, Manny's office one time, but he was nobody. He was nothing at that time, 1978. Right. And Manny said that we had lunch over there. But he was no one significant, like so many I met at that time. When I went to prison in February of 80, and that's when really Sal and Willie explode and become the biggest drug lords in the U.S.
Willie Falcone and Sal.
Yeah, and Sal Magluta.
And let's talk about that really quick. You are responsible for giving those guys their start in the cocaine business, truly.
If you listen to the prosecutor in Cocaine Cowboy Kings of Miami, mm-hmm. Usually the government knows more about the history of drug dealers because they spend a lot of money and they have a lot of snitches. If you listen to him, he says one thing that's really funny. He said there's two ways in life to get rich. He said you work very hard or you get very lucky. He said Sal and Willie got very lucky that Jorge Valdez went off to prison and handed him the keys to the kingdom.
I see.
So Sal was a very close friend of mine, right? I love Willie. I love Sal. I don't think I ever met with Willie 4 or 5 times in my life. And when I was bringing in all this, and we had company, we had a shipping company, we had an airline company, Manny had the biggest coal mines in Colombia, the biggest emerald mines, construction company. My dad was best friends with Sal's father and another gentleman. And Oscar, oh my God. And they came from Cuba, and every day after dinner, they would go to each other's house for coffee, right? One day to my dad, one day to Manolo, Sal's father, one day to Oscar. They did that till they died. And of course, my dad didn't know what I was doing, but he was always bragging that I was flying all over the world and had jets and all that. And Sal put two and two together and said to my dad, hey, ask George to give me a break. Now, I swear this on every Bible that there is. And so what I was afraid was that Sal, because my dad kept saying, hey, I went to Manolo's house and I saw Sal, because Sal and I could see each other when I went to University of Miami. He dropped out of high school, so we didn't keep in touch. And what I was afraid was that Sal was going to tell my dad, hey, your son is dealing in drugs, man. Tell him to give me a break. So I met with Sal, and we had lunch. And at my office, and I'm like, well, how much money do you have? And this is what he said to me. He said, I have $30,000. And I laughed. And this is 1978, because at that time, a kilo in Miami was 45. And I said, look, let me see what I can do, and I'll put something together and see how I can help you out. That is the God's honest truth. And for people that want to see receipts, I'll show you. You can post it in your documentary.
And we will.
On accounting that the DA discovered in my briefcase of how much kilos I was giving Sal and how much they were paying me daily.
Okay, so
25 keys.
So they became one of the distributors of your and Manny's cocaine brought over from Colombia.
So I ended up a month later. We had 30 kilos that we were supposed to deliver to someone that got busted. And I'm like, I'm going to Europe again. And I called Sal and Willie. That's the first time I ever met Willie before. And another gentleman who was their first partner, who then later they cut out, a guy named Ramiro, which you see in the picture in Bolivia with me. And I said, look, you want to get started? I'll give you 30 kilos. And Sal did not want to take the 30 kilos. Willie said, I think we can handle that. I said, look, you got a month. I'm going to be gone for a month. You got a month to pay me. And when I came back, they paid me. And then from there on, till the day I go off to prison and I realized I couldn't handle things anymore, and Sal, the only person I trust, and I introduced him to Manny. I introduced him to the sheriff in Clewiston. You know, all these people testified to this.
Okay.
I introduced him to the sheriff who would protect the loads. When I did that, at that time, I was giving him 25 kilos at a time. I'd give him 20, I'd give him 10, and they pay me 100 every other day, every day, things like that.
So they really exploded
And
into
they did it.
gigantic traffickers after you went to prison. And it sounds like you basically gave them your operation.
I gave him the entire operation.
Your routes, your connections.
Who to sell it to in California?
Oh, you gave them your California
Yeah,
buyers too.
everything. And you know how to deal with them. And the deal was that, so Sal said to me, I'll give you 1/3. Emmanuel just talked about that in my document. I'll give you 1/3 of everything that comes in. I said, I don't want 1/3 because I'm going to be in prison. You guys are going to be risking your ass. And here I am in prison. So I said, but here's the deal. I'm going to give you, at that time, kilo was 18,000 in Colombia. I'm going to give you I'm going to give you $320,000 to buy me 20 kilos. And every time you bring in a load, buy me my 20 kilos, sell them, and give me the profit.
Wow.
And hold the profit. That's it. That's all I want.
Okay. So you were making still hundreds of thousands of dollars while you were in prison.
Well, when I was in prison, I didn't want to touch any of the money. They weren't giving me any money while I was in prison because, you know, I had a lot of money.
Right. But then you
I
were,
went to prison, I had $10 million cash. So, you know.
you were making, we'll call it passive income that you weren't
they're
touching.
supposed to be holding this for me.
Royalties.
Right. Which is according to the sheriff and all the different loads they brought in. And according to Manny, who told me that they told him that they had this money, over $7 million. But I got out of prison and I went to see Sal. He says, we got out. I don't have any money. Things went bad for us. I'm sorry. I'm going to see if eventually I can get you some money. That's exactly. It didn't give me $1. Actually saved my life. Because if Sal would have done what I would have done, which would have been, hey, you out of prison, you took tortures for us, you didn't rat us out, you handed everything to us, you treated us like royalty, here's the business, take over. But you know what? It was a blessing. It was a blessing from God because I separated myself from them and I was able to honestly say, I don't think that, you know, when I was asked by the attorney, do you think that they got out did they get out of the drug business? I had to say, I had to believe they did because if they didn't, there would have been a bunch of son of a bitches for betraying me.
Right. Okay. So tell me about Pablo Escobar now. When you go to prison in 79, 80, you get sentenced to 15 off of, and you do about 5.
I did
off
5.
Of 15.
Back then you do 1/3.
So is this the era that Pablo Escobar now becomes the key guy feeding
That's the
Miami?
That's the era when different groups surfaced. Not only Pablo Escobar. Pablo Escobar surfaced. Gacha, who I worked with a lot afterwards. The Ochoa brothers, which should have never gotten involved because they were rich from the cradle.
Right.
And other groups. There was another guy just as powerful who, when I came out of prison, who I went to work with at the beginning. I brought 32 loads for him.
Who was that?
Which was a guy named Frank Jimenez.
Okay.
Called El Negro. And he was very, very rich and very powerful. Quiet guy, a gentleman. The legend goes that he was at a Christmas party, got drunk, and said, Pablo's got the fame, but I got all the money. And Pablo had him killed.
Wow.
You know?
Okay. So the early 80s, when you're down, is when what history knows as the Medellín Cartel formed.
Right.
Which was, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, was just this loose association of different drug trafficking organizations out of Medellín.
Yeah. I think if you look back to 1980, OPEC was in the forefront of all television, the oil cartels and the oil cartels. So my thought pattern was there was no such thing as a Medellín cartel. As a matter of fact, here's interesting. You know who said that about 3 years ago after I said it for the first time? Jorge Ochoa in an interview. He said there was never a Medellín drug cartel.
Right.
The Ochoas had their organization, their accountants, their routes, their assassins. Pablo had his. Gacha had his. You think Pablo was powerful? Gacha was 20 times more powerful and deadlier than Pablo. The thing about, I'll tell you why Pablo becomes the person.
This
and
legend.
then you got Pablo. And so those different groups, and then you had the Ochoas, and then you have Manuel Garces. So all those different groups had their own organization. In Cali, there was 3 families that ended up creating their own. But to me, the Americans were like, okay, we can't focus on going after Pablo or after Gacha or after the Ochoas, say that today Gacha is our enemy, tomorrow Pablo is our enemy. So why don't we just group them together, call it the Medellín Drug Cartel. Now there's one organization we can go after.
Right.
And that's what becomes thing. Pablo became notorious when he decided to run for Congress, which was stupid.
Totally.
Because they called them out, they embarrassed him. I mean, his reason for running for Congress was legitimate, man. He wanted to really make a difference. He grew up in the poorest of all neighborhoods in Colombia. But they knew that he was a drug dealer, right? And they called him out, and then that's when he declared war on the government. And then the government passed that extradition treaty. Because here's the thing. The United States is the only country in the world that will extradite people. Colombia says you can't extradite a citizen for a crime that's not a crime in our country. So the only country in the world that has a crime called conspiracy is America. Started by the Kennedys, right? I mean, you don't have to do nothing. You and I can right now, Michael, talk about, hey, I want to go back. You say, I got buyers in California. You make a phone call. Hey, guys, I'm going to have a route. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to call my deep people. Nothing ever happens. We'll both go to jail for life.
That's
enough.
Yeah.
That's enough.
So
we had one overt act.
Yeah.
We had 2. You made one phone call. I made one phone call. And we had intent. Now, Pablo is saying, it's like India extraditing me for killing chickens or cows in Colombia.
Yeah. America said that because it's our people that are getting poisoned with drugs from these men. That's not saying it's right, but I'm saying that's where they get that line of thinking from. But even during Pablo's notorious era of violence and infamy, it's all of these different organizations, Gotcha, the Ochoas, Frankie Jimenez, that are all sending product via the Caribbean to Florida. Where does Manny now, your godfather, during this time, where does he fit into all this?
So when I come out of prison, Manny's in prison awaiting extradition.
Okay, so Manny actually went back to Colombia.
Right.
And left you in Miami.
Yeah, he went back to Colombia. And so I get out of prison and Manny is in prison. So he's my contact, right? But I called his right-hand man who was also used to handle things for us. And that's how I get started. I get started with Frankie Jimenez again.
Okay.
And I was giving Manny, it was me. When I came out, there was another friend of mine, a guy that I had met years ago, named Junior, and I said, look, I'll make you equal partners because I can't be around this stuff. And I'll handle all of it over in Colombia. And we'll go back to my same buyers. And then we created new buyers. And then you handle all the operations. You receive the coconut. So
how did you get back your buyers, though, after you come out of prison? Where were the Falcons? Where was Willie? Where was Sal?
They ended up having their own all complete set of organization.
Okay, so you were able to get back your old clients plus new customers.
Yeah.
Now you have your cheaper Coke, more established routes. The industry by 84
at that time, so what ended up happening in 85, I was in prison with a guy named Dickie Lynn. Just great guy. The guy's doing life, it's very, very sad. But Dickie Lynn and I brought in over 30 loads straight to Louisiana. If you see like the airplanes in American Made that supposed to come in during so helicopters go to drop people at the oil platforms, right?
Yeah.
So these people had it set up that the airplane would come back at the same time at the same altitude as the helicopters. So the radar would think it was just helicopters.
Just a helicopter. Wow.
And we brought in 30 some odd loads.
How much Coke in a load?
We were bringing in 500, 400, 500 kilos.
Wow.
Sometimes some months we brought in 3 loads.
Wow. That was your primary route at that time?
That was my primary route at that time.
Wow. And okay. And who were you buying from down there? Was it still just Manny, or were you dealing with other members?
So at that time, Manny came out and he took over again. And what ended up happening is that we said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We knew a lot of the stuff that was going on. Like, for example, Pablo. If Pablo found out you had a route, and even as much money and power as he had, and you would not take his drugs on your route, he'd have you killed.
Wow.
And he did that to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And including a lot of other stuff later on that we found out, where he was telling the DEA about loads coming to the United States that were his competitors. So I told Manny, I said, Manny, if we're going to bring in 600 kilos, let's say, why don't we bring in 300 of ours and take the 150 and let Gacha take 150 and let Pablo take 150?
I see. So to avoid keep Manny safe.
Well, and that way they were my cheerleaders instead of I was a target for them.
Right.
So I did that with them. I brought in a lot at the beginning, a lot with Frank until Pablo had him killed.
Wow, I see. So and then these guys, Pablo and Gacha, they had their own buyers set up. So all you had to do was deliver.
I just delivered to the one guy. They have one guy. I would deliver.
And you wouldn't even take a fee?
Oh, hell yeah, I'd take a fee.
What was your fee
for
off
them?
Of that?
Back then, Dickie Lynn was charging me $5. I was charging them $7.
You were talking Gacha and, okay, Pablo? Wow. So this is your really height. Even though you were making millions before you go to prison in 79.
I started making millions again.
You were making, and that didn't take you long.
No, it took me 6 months.
Wow.
And the sad part, I didn't have to. I didn't have to because I had a horse operation that was making me $1 million a year. I had set up orange groves. I had a business that legitimately was making millions of dollars.
On its own?
On its own.
Not even washing money through
Not washing money, nothing. Yeah, I mean, I had used a lot of my old drug money to buy the horses and build a ranch and all of that stuff. So we did that. And at that time, all those Silent Willie's loads were coming to the Bahama like they did in Cocaine Cowboy and the speedboats.
Right.
I didn't bring a single load ever through the Bahamas. Ever. I didn't drop one in the water. I didn't drop any yet. From the time that I worked with Dickie Lynn, we also worked, I brought in about 10 loads through Mexico at the beginning. I'm not going to say I was the first person to bring in loads through Mexico because I have no idea if anybody had before. But I can tell you that we were bringing loads in 1984 when most of the cocaine coming to America was coming to the Bahamas in those speedboats.
Yeah.
And we were bringing in, literally, we were renting from the shores a Mitsubishi, and we were bringing in 600-700 kilos to Juarez, Mexico, and then transporting over. I brought in complete loads for Gacha, complete loads for Pablo, and just charged the freight.
What was, how'd you get the coke from Colombia to Juarez?
Flying.
Okay. And then you could go straight? Like
you could go straight in the Mitsubishi 200.
Okay. Wow. I think you probably were the first one, at least of the major traffickers to do that.
And this is before, in Colombia,
there were no cartels, Mexican
before
cartels.
the Juarez cartel, before any of those. There was a guy that, I'm not going to say his name because he's still in prison, just a great guy. And he was actually, he managed some of the biggest entertainers in Mexico at that time. And one of the loads, the first load, we landed it in the farm of one of the most famous Mexican entertainers that there was. So, but,
wow.
That was at a time between that and the fact that by that time I had stopped working with Dickie. And Dickie went on his own. He started just bringing on his own loads, his own coke. He made some collection. And then it was the time that I couldn't deal with it anymore. I had a friend of mine that used to come over to the ranch. He had been in the horse business, in the pot business years ago. And he would bring 10 mares to breed to my horse. And his name was Lazaro. And I would always ask him. He moved from Miami to Ocala. He was part of the old Cuban pot smuggler, right? Which is how the whole drug trade started in the U.S., right? It was the Bay of Pigs soldiers that wanted to go to save Cuba from Fidel, and then they started smuggling marijuana and forgot about Fidel.
Yeah.
So anyway, long story, I would ask him, Lazaro, how'd you get out? And I never forget till today, sitting right there in the porch of my ranch, and he's like being pregnant. You're either pregnant or not. I'm like, that really doesn't answer the question for me, but I'll take your word for it, And And it was in the back of my mind. I had to get out.
Yeah,
I had
because
to get out.
it was eating at you. I mean,
And my mother constantly.
right.
And now it was a different world. There was no violence when I started. Now I had to go around with bodyguards with machine guns and stuff like that. So
Yeah, you were sleeping with
it wasn't me, man.
You were sleeping with a gun under your pillow. You had a Uzi next to your bed.
Yeah, next to me, and Beretta 9mm underneath my pillow.
You had a mansion in a gated community in Miami with cameras everywhere. I think your son, Jorgecito, had to go to school accompanied by bodyguards. And
I had to pay the school money so that the bodyguard could stay outside the classroom.
Yeah.
And make sure. And it was,
I recall this excerpt in your book where you're up late at night and you're alone and you're sniffing coke and you're watching porn, and it reminded me of truly Tony Montana and Scarface sitting there miserable. This Cuban refugee, this Mariolito, who came to America with holes in his shoes, and now he's worth tens of millions of dollars, and there's nothing inside. He's empty. That reminded me of that excerpt from your book where you had it all. You had
everything you wanted.
The American dream, and it was you wanted to kill yourself.
I never did coke till the end there, and that was probably at a moment where it was like, and I probably did it very little because all of a sudden I realized that it could control me. And I have an addictive personality, so anything that can control me, I stay away fast. And but I'm looking at the world, and I just can't make sense of the world anymore. And I've always been very introspective, and I'm always like, what was I created for? What the heck, man? Nobody has two fingerprints alike. An amazing creator creates us so differently like that. We're so perfect, right? How can we come to the world to be born, suffer, and die? Because if you put our life, we suffer more than we have joy, right? We'll bury our parents. God forbid we bury a child. Yeah. Why? What is our purpose? And nothing made sense for me. None of this. I thought that when I had that beautiful car, I'd be happy. Now I got 3 Gambalas worth $1 million and I'm miserable. I thought when I had this beautiful, now I got mansions. I got a mansion in Fort Myers Beach. I have a house in Vail, Colorado. I have a multi-million-dollar ranch. And I'm miserable. I have everything. Women mean nothing to me. My mother I adore my mother. The highest respect I ever have for anyone. And I have no respect for women.
Yeah.
And then my daughter's born. And I remember I had a guy that all he would do is build furniture for me with hidden compartments where within 10 feet, I'd have a gun, right? And so it's like in one of the videos, my son, Jorgito talks about, he said, I remember walking around the backyard and there was bodyguards with machine gun and dogs. I remember finding a panic room and he said, it freaked me out. There was guns, tons of money, cocaine. And, it was to a point that I'm like, what sense does life really matter?
Yeah.
In reality, honestly, I was looking to get killed. It's really what my only answer is like, we all wake up, we all go to bed at night and look in the ceiling and we wake up and look at a mirror and we have to ask ourselves, do we like what we see? Yeah. And I knew that I was, I see kids that had no chance would end up where, similar life or even much lesser, but that trajectory. But I had no excuse.
Yeah, you're very much
I had everything, man. Education, parents, morals.
And that life where you have bodyguards roaming your house and you can't sleep at night because you're so paranoid. That's kind of being in a prison in itself. It's not really freedom.
I heard of Jelly Roll one day. I never knew who he was or nothing, but I heard of him because I saw that when he won New Artist of the Year, he didn't show up to get his award. And people said, why? And he's like, because I went to a detention center because these kids are used to people coming and they never show up. And I became a big fan of his because like tomorrow I'll head off to Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola, where I built the first church inside any United States prison for my 25th consecutive year. And so I became a fan. but specifically because when he sings in that song, "Somebody Save Me," that was me, man.
Wow.
But you know what was so sad, Michael? Everybody wanted to be me. Everybody told me how great I was. Women told me how beautiful I was. I could go in a club and pick any girl I wanted.
Yeah.
Do whatever. I had nothing, any value. And deep down inside, I was like Jelly Roll saying, "Somebody save me." You know, I am broken beyond repair. You know, and that's how I felt. I felt there was just no out.
And the moment where you said enough, I think you had had been with your mistress, and I think your daughter stumbled in.
Well, what happened, whenever my daughter, who became the eyes, became my eyes. I mean, that carpet, I forgot, I skipped it. When she was born, he came up to me and says, "Everything you stand for is everything you're going to stand against as of today." And I'm like, "Oh, man, you're crazy," right? So whenever I had my daughter, I had no women around me. This time, I was visiting with her, and I was in my ranch, and I had a bunch of porn actresses, and I was just partying. And in the middle of the night, my ex-wife dropped her off at the gate, and it freaked me out. When the security guy said, "Hey, your daughter's here." So I'm like, "All right, bring her." So he brings her to the house, and I tell the nanny, because I had a full-time nanny, I said, "Take her to her room and make sure she doesn't get out." And she was asleep, so she went to her room, took her to her room, and about 3 o'clock in the morning, I would have given anybody $1 million if they could have come to that bedroom door and knock.
Yeah.
If they could get to me, I would have given $1 million. She got there and started knocking and started saying, "Daddy, Daddy, it's Crystal." And you know, it was the first time in my life that everything just crumbled.
Yeah.
I felt so filthy, so dirty. I said, you know, here's the only thing in my life that's sacred and pure. And if I open that freaking door, I'm going to contaminate her. I chased the woman out the window. I called my security and said, "Get them the hell out of here." And I went into the shower, and I thought I was going to try to scrub the filth off of me, and it wouldn't come off. I went back into my bed, and a guy that people said ice ran through my veins, I started quiver and shaking. And when I thought that she stopped crying, about an hour, 45 minutes, I went out to get water, and she was in the floor crying. And it was like I saw this baby like sinking, and I'm trying to touch the fingers to save her, and I couldn't. And I said, my life changes today. I had no idea what that meant. I knew most likely that I'd be killed because we didn't have a good retirement program.
Why did you think you'd be killed?
Well,
Just for leaving the game?
because at that time, if there's one thing a lot of people cannot tolerate is uncertainty.
Right.
Why is George walking away? There's no investigation. There's no indictment.
Right.
He's making $1 million for doing nothing. Right. Why is he walking away? Why? When they can't answer that why, it's better to eliminate that why. Mm-hmm. But I didn't care, man. I had to save my daughter. And I moved from Miami to my ranch, didn't go back to Miami for 3 years. I believed that the sun used to rise and fall in Miami. That's how much I loved that city.
I still believe
at
that.
that time. Didn't go back. Wow. And I hired this guy to teach me karate. I remember the first day he came, he's like, "I'm going to teach you about the sword." And I'm like, I was excited. I'm like, man, I love weapons. I picked the right karate guy. Here we're going to start getting right into weapons. So I'm putting on my karate. You know, I'd done a lot of karate before. I was a brown belt before in New Jersey. I competed for years. And I'm like, I'm going to get into it right off the bat. And when I turn around, he pulls out a Bible. And I was so freaking mad and irate. I'm like, look, dude, I'm paying you a lot of money to come teach me 2 hours of karate every day. I don't believe in that sword. I don't believe in that book, what the book says. Tomorrow, take that sword and bring the real sword. He walked up to me this close. First person that long, many, many years, got that close to him. Says, son, what I got to give you, you got no money to pay. I quickly realized this guy's a 7th-degree black belt. He's going to begin to introduce Jesus into me by kicking me through the walls. So I'm like, all right, brother, don't get excited.
Wow.
After a karate lesson, while the steam room is heating up, waste your time. I told you just like that. I don't believe. And he kept coming back for 3 years, every day. And I did everything in the world I could to chase him away. And I couldn't understand how this man that had a little bitty 1,000 square foot house, an old beat up car, and married to the same woman for 25 years, and tell me he was in love with her. I'm like, she's 45? Hell no, man. You can't love a 45-year-old woman. Look, I'm surrounded by 20-year-olds, 23-year-olds, and I hate them all.
Yeah.
Why was he so happy? And he didn't bash her into me. You got to become a Christian. You got to go to church. None of that crap. Which is the problem we have today. Why people don't want to become a Christian? Not because of Jesus, because of Christians.
Right.
All he would say to me is, I'm like, man, why are you so happy? Look how I live and I'm miserable. And you got nothing and you're happy. He said, I have an intimate relationship with Jesus. And I was like, what the f*** is that? I'm surrounded by people and I have no intimate relationship with anyone. You have a relationship with a ghost? Because back then I'm thinking we came from Cuba to be with Jesus and we left a life of luxury with the communists to go hungry in America. So where the hell is Jesus, And then of course you create all kinds of things, right? Why good women can have babies and why whores have babies in crack houses. Why parents bury children and criminals live a long life. All the stuff that you do to justify why you don't want to have faith. But I believe deep down inside, like I said, there's no atheist in a trench hole. We all have a desire for a higher being. For me, it's my relationship with God and my relationship with Jesus. I tell people I'm not Christian. I'm just a lover of Jesus, man. And I just follow 2 commandments, man. I love God and I love my neighbor. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, black, white, gay, transsexual, transgender, triple sexual, whatever.
So this karate teacher really set you began your journey to theology, to God, back to God, and to theology. How though did you actually get out of the game? Did you tell Manny?
Yeah, I made a phone call. I made a phone call to Manny in the middle of the night that night. I said, I'm done. And I called my partner, the guy that was handling everything in the United States. I say, it's all yours.
Who was your partner? Can you
tell us? His name was Junior. Yeah, he got murdered. I'm like, it's all yours. Again, how much do you want? I don't want anything. Because if you're out, you're out.
What did Manny say?
He said, I understand. And I think at that time, he also walked away. Because Manny's a very, 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 look, he's 96 years old today. He was the richest man in Colombia at one time. He never had a bodyguard. He walked 5 miles every day, went to church every day. The good loved him. The politicians loved him. The crooked loved him. Pablo loved him. Everybody loved him. He was just that kind of a man. He was just,
We said off camera before we started this interview, Manny, when he was bringing loads, when you started working with him at the beginning, he would say if you got 300 bricks through, he would leave 5 kilos and the profit off that would go to...
So he had 2 sisters that were nuns.
Yeah.
And every load, there was 2 bricks with a M for monja, which was for the nuns. So I was to sell that, get the money, and send it off to a person. And they built radio station, the Amazons. They did all kinds of stuff, schools, everything with it.
Yeah. I mean, they don't make gangsters like that anymore.
No, to me it was, I don't know. I didn't understand it. I'm like, man, we're bad. we can't be with Satan and Jesus at the same time, buddy. But I guess he saw it differently. He did. He saw it as a business, so he never thought that he saw with Satan. He wouldn't do the things that most people did. I mean, he was taken many times. People robbed him many times. He never ordered anybody's death. Wow. And it was.
So you think after you left the game, that's when he started to make his way out of the game too?
I mean, he was so wealthy, man.
Right.
So wealthy.
And he didn't do any real prison time, it sounds like.
No, he did about 4 years awaiting extradition.
How did he not get extradited?
He was the next guy to be extradited when Pablo got the government to overthrow the extradition treaty. Wow. He was the next on the plane.
Wow.
He's got a lot of cases pending in the U.S.
Still
for money laundering.
Okay.
The first money laundering cases were the United States versus Manny Garces.
Wow. So he's never coming back here.
Oh, no.
So he has the story much like the Ochoas, much like Pablo could have had if he had any sense, which was stack your wealth and take your little itty bitty prison time and then retire. Because the Ochoas got away with a ton of money. You know, they basically just laid their arms down to the government, and
one just got out a couple of days ago.
Yeah, and they speculate he's going to go back and be living his life as a wealthy man.
But they were very wealthy to begin with.
Sure, they were scions of a horse breeding family. His father was the
biggest Pasofino breeder in the world.
Can you tell us this for the camera? Did Old Man Ochoa, the patriarch, was he ever involved in cocaine trafficking?
You know, that's the only group I never worked with.
Oh, okay.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't believe so.
There were rumors.
I believe the kids, they were young kids, got involved just like all of us did at that time, thinking that it was a harmless crime.
Yeah.
You know, it's like everything that we do in life. I always say an alcoholic doesn't start by drinking a gallon of vodka, right? He's going to die. Starts a little bit of time. No one shoots an ounce of heroin, you know, and it's like that. And I believe it's because we come into the world. This is my theory. We come into the world with a hole, an emptiness. And that emptiness, society jumps up and says, hey, I got what it takes to fill it. Women, drugs, alcohol, power, murder, whatever. To me, I had that hole too. At the beginning, it was easy to get involved in the cocaine trade, right? Because it was we thought we're the Kennedys of the 20th century. We thought we're bootleggers, right? We're not harming anybody. But one thing leads to another. Before you know it, you're down a rabbit hole that you can't get out. Mm. You know, and I saw it happen with me. I had that hole, and it wasn't until the moment, honestly, you know, once I got out and I'm living on my ranch, I'm breeding horses. I owned the best stud in the world at that time. I paid $1 million for a horse, not even knowing that was a good deal or not. Turned out to be, I was breeding 300 mares at 150 mares at $3,000 a piece, and breeding some of the best show mares. I had them sold for $6 million for 80% when I got arrested.
Wow.
So, but tons of time, right? Because I'm not doing nothing.
Right.
Running my business, building orange groves. Yeah. And you think a lot about your life.
Yeah.
About my purpose. You know, it wasn't until I went to prison that I found joy in my life. When I lost everything. When I walked into that and the prosecutor said to me, I want it all. I said, do you know how much I got? And they said, no, but I know who does. Walks over, opens the door, DA, FBI, IRS, and Customs comes out. They knew how much toilet paper I consumed. They said, we want it all. And here's all the deeds, all the money, all the bank account, everything, all the cards, everything. And I remember that the only guy that was nasty was the customs agent. The other guys were great gentlemen. I said to me, what do you mean by all? And the guy said, I want your underwear so I can burn them. I looked at him and said, you don't want to smell them before you burn them? You know, it was like stupid.
Okay. Yes, this is what's fascinating is the fact that you retired, you did something. I
was gone away from the business for 3.5 years.
That's so crazy. You're literally the only drug trafficker, I think, in popular culture that's ever done that, that's ever quit while they're ahead. I can't think of anybody else. Jorge Ochoa is maybe the closest. You literally picked up the phone. You told Manny you were done. You gave the business to your associate, and you were out for 3.5 years. You're doing karate. I believe you're becoming more religious. You still have problems with your wife and with your...
Yeah, I did not. I wasn't becoming religious yet, but it wasn't what he was saying. Because honestly, everything he was reading to me in the Bible, I didn't remember none of it because he would beat the crap out of me for 2 hours, man. I mean, I had big holes in the sheetrock, in the walls of him kicking me through it.
Wow.
But seeing his life and seeing that, well, perhaps there is joy.
Right.
I can tell you the moment when my life drastically changed. I can tell you the moment and the hour and exactly what I said. This was September 1st, 1990. My divorce, July 1st, 1990. My divorce was final. My wife is dragging my baby girl away, who's my life, who's everything in my life, right? Crystal. I mean, I used to drive 12 hours from Miami to Fort Walton Beach, where she moved when we separated, to pick up my daughter, drive 12 hours back because she couldn't fly, keep her for a week, drive 12 hours to take her back, and 2 hours back. running a big drug empire at the same time.
Wow.
Okay? She is crying and she's dragging her away. And at that moment, I went into my room and I got on my knees and I'm about 11 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, God, first of all, I want to tell you, I don't believe. I don't believe you exist. That's number one. Number two, if you do exist, you're probably looking at me and say, you're so bad. Stay down there. But number three, if you are the reason that man has got that joy, kill me or save me.
So what did he do?
Nothing happened. I thought. Except 3 months later, now I'm supposed to become a better man. I'm going to study the Bible. I'm going to become a better person, right? I'm not going to cheat on my wife. I'm not going to, do the things that are not right. And I get arrested. I had no clue.
Were they building? They were
Building
investigating
this
you
case for 5 years, yeah.
based off of
The fact that they
and-
couldn't stand that I had retired
Yeah.
and was living this playboy life.
Right.
$3 million house in Vail, $2 million house on the ocean, $40 million, $30 million ranch.
Horses worth
Horses,
tens of millions.
Yeah, I had $5 million worth of horses. Well, if you count the price, what I paid for, but if you count the price of my horse, I built a hospital at the ranch. And then I was just building the most modern orange groves, had a contract.
Where?
In the ranch. I was building 600 acres of groves. So I was going to be making $3, $4, $5 million a month, a year, legit, in 1987, 88. So
You're still only 32 years old at the time.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I had a Hawker jet. I had $1 million worth of cars. I spent my whole life just playboy life. I go skiing in Colorado for a month.
So how are they compiling the evidence? I mean, I know that the feds need scant evidence. If they really want you, they're going to get you. I mean, they didn't really even have enough to convict you on for your first prison sentence. But again, it's the feds.
Oh, the first prison sentence was totally made up, man. They took me to Macon, Georgia, which I'd never been, and said I was part of Harold Rosenthal's organization, which I had just met.
Right.
Like a month earlier, and he had been a fugitive for 3 years.
And they didn't even have any evidence. Noriega had sold all the keys.
Nothing. Zero. Well, enough to the point that they couldn't get on it. The grand jury in Miami met 3 times, could not indict me.
Right.
The grand jury in Central Florida met 3 times, could not indict me. The grand jury in Northern Florida met twice, could not indict me. They were about to let me out.
Yeah.
After 10 months on a sworn complaint. Actually, they were letting me out. The judge was dropping all. I was not on an indictment. I was on what's called a sworn complaint, which no one's supposed to be there longer than 30 days. I was there for 9 months.
Yeah.
And I was getting out. The judge dropped all the charges. When the marshals came in and says, arrest him, Macon, Georgia has just returned an indictment. They said I was partnered with Harold Rosenthal. Harold Rosenthal, the guy that was transporting for us, had faked his death 3 years earlier. He had a case in Macon, Georgia, faked his death, comes into the courtroom with me from Panama, said, Your Honor, I'm the second Jew to come back from the dead.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, that was the guy that used to supply his drugs. They kidnapped in Panama the captain of the Bolivian Air Force, right? Who was the guy that handled the coke to us in Bolivia, right? Brought him to the United States. Here's the man that sold the cocaine to Jorge Valdez, right? Guess what? He gets found innocent. And I'm like, if this bitch didn't sell nothing, what did I buy?
Right.
So
what did they do this time that was different?
Well, now they have been following me forever.
Right.
Because I was on the parole.
Right.
So
you're on parole.
Yeah, and they knew, like, for example, they even knew how much clothes my ex-wife, I would give her $10,000 a day to go shopping. And what does she do? She goes out and gets a loyalty card. I'm like, what do you think I'm giving you cash?
Right.
So they're like, hey, she bought $100,000 at Cache, a clothing store in Miami.
So this second time after you're already out of the drug business, they're basically, it sounds like it's a money laundering criminal IRS kind of case that they're trying to stick on you, right?
He said, little money, lots of time, lots of money, little time. All they wanted was the money.
Right.
And what my attorney asked is like, look, he's willing, he walked away on his own years ago. Now he has a chance to beat you and he's willing to plead guilty. with no recommendation from you. And I'll tell you what the judge said when I walked into the judge. And yet, all we ask is that you charge him with a parole violation, right? So I did 15. Out of the 15, I did 5, right? I had 10 years left.
Yeah.
So I'd already been on parole for 4 years, right? I had
So
6
you
left.
6 left.
But when you violate, you start all over again.
Yeah.
So we asked the prosecutor that I want to plead to the 10 years, the parole violation. And I'll tell you what, Jeff Sessions, who became Trump's attorney general, was a gentleman with us. He and the prosecutor were amazing. But I walked in front of the judge when I'm willing to plead guilty. And you know what the judge's word? Look up the transcript. Mr. Valdez, before you plead guilty, I want you to know that I reject any deal you reach with the government now or ever. I want you to know that it's my intention to sentence you to a life sentence. I want you to know that you will die in a federal prison.
Wow. How did you feel?
I was numb. I didn't care. I realized I've been walking dead for a lot of years.
Mm-hmm.
I said, Your Honor, you can only give me what God wants to give me. Whether I die in a prison on the streets, doesn't matter. I've been dead for a lot of years.
Wow. Did that impact him, you think, when you said that?
What happened is when they did all when the parole, then you go to a parole officer that does all the pre-sentencing investigation, all that. And when he became aware, because he was the guy that sentenced Dickie Lynn to life.
Mm.
So this technically is the same case, except there was 101 people already convicted and done with. They come and get me at the end on a made-up case. If they thought they really had a case, they would have got me and tried with Dickie.
Right.
Which literally they should have. Because I brought in 30 loads with Dickie.
Right.
But anyway, when I got sentenced, he said, the reason I'm going to give the sentence I'm going to give is because I'm convinced that the man I'm sentencing is not the man who committed these crimes.
Wow.
And gave me 10 years.
Yeah.
And
so he did see it in
and
you.
was an unbelievable judge. A year and a half later, my daughter was having a nervous breakdown, and I couldn't get a permit to go see her from my parole officer. So my attorney, I said to my parole officer, who was a really great guy in Chicago, I said, look, I'm going to go to my daughter's graduation, little graduation. He said, I'm going to have to violate you. I said, I don't care. I said, when I come back, I'll turn myself in, but my daughter needs me. He said, look, the only way you can go is have your attorney write the judge a letter asking him to give me permission to let you go. Now think about it. This judge is sentencing me knowing that I brought in 40, 50 loads while under parole.
Yeah.
And all that. You know what the judge did? He took my parole off.
Wow. So you went to your daughter's graduation.
I said, look, I was preaching in a lot of places. I said, look, I got to go see my kids. I got to preach. And he was just a great judge. But, he saw that I went back to school. He saw that, the difference between, if you take, this is why I never wanted to write. I turned down 2 $1 million offers from Hollywood. One right when the book came out. I mean, I even had a huge offer from Chuck Norris, who wanted to play the karate instructor to lead me to the Lord. And I never wanted to tell that story at that time because I didn't want to glamorize that life. Yeah, I can tell stories that will blow people's mind away. But I'm cognizant of the pain that this caused. Forget about anybody else. Forget about my torture. I deserved it. In prison, I had a hell of a good time in prison. I had a mistress inside the prison. I had fun. But my parents suffer. My brother gave out 10 years of his life to bring my kids and my parents to visit me. And I'm always cognizant that how do I glorify that at the cost of the pain of so many people, So therefore, I didn't want to tell the story, this drug story that everybody wants to tell. Could have done that in 1998. Mm-hmm. I want to tell a story that you can mess your life up big time, like I did. But you know what? There's God. There's faith. There's a God who forgives. There's redemption. You can become better. Your life must not end the way that it begins. And, I look back throughout my life now, I walked out of prison dead broke, didn't have a dollar, went back to school, earned my PhD, and then my father passed. He was my best friend in the world. And I'm there in the shower crying, and actually it was a month before my wedding to my wife of 27 years, the love of my life. And I was there crying. I mean, like, man, he never gave me anything physical. He had nothing to give me. I said, but you know what he gave me? His presence. And I told my wife, she was getting ready to start her PhD. And I said, I'm moving to Georgia. I'm gonna leave my job. I was one of 5 Hispanics with a PhD in Bible in the whole United States, recruited by every university, because at that time they wanted to get Spanish students. And I said, I'm gonna leave that, and we're gonna move to Georgia. I'm gonna be a full-time dad to my kids, because otherwise, how are my kids gonna remember me? Someone who sent a check every month and had a great summer? I want to be there all the time. What are we gonna do? I said, I have no idea, but God will provide. And I said, I know what we can do. We know how to clean. Let's start a little cleaning company. And we started a little cleaning company, and we started then a little franchise. And in 10 years, I built it into a multi-million-dollar national, international company.
Wow.
And when I walked away, we had just done $55 million that year.
Wow. You sold it?
No, I had 2 partners, my brother and another brother from another mother I call. And at that time, our company had no value in the sense of, because it was a large catastrophe, it isn't like you have contracts where,
Yeah.
So, it either pours, or you stop.
Feast or famine.
Right, East or famine. But, I got the millions of dollars that we had in equipment.
Wow.
So, but I sat there in our last job in Louisiana. I've been gone for 2.5 years away from home. Went home 2 Christmases, for 2 days each Christmas. And I sat there and I'm paying off everybody, all the bills. And I said to myself, if I continue, all I'm going to do, we have no debt. We got plenty of money to live a heck of a life. I said, all I'm going to do is continue to add zeros to my bank account. Now, when we started the company, I told my partners, what makes a great company? I said, let's go off for a weekend and define, because I want to create a great company. And we sat there and then, what makes a great company? Great employees, great technology, great customers? No. I said, you know what makes a great company? One that gives back. So we're going to take 10% off the top. Not the profit, because then we can be creative with the profits. Off the top, and we create a foundation called Transformative Foundation. And then we're going to use this money to help those that can't help themselves. And we did. We ended up, we built the only church inside the United States prison at Angola, Louisiana State Penitentiary. We did programs to get kids off drugs. We created in Mexico, a whole nursing home, because back in Mexico, in Hispanic culture, you go live with your parents. Mm-hmm. But what happened in Cozumel, where we're living, is people came for tourism. So they didn't have no family. They got old and they had no one to take care of them. So we built, in conjunction with the Catholic Church, that we built a nursing home for those people that had no family there. And then God called me to send books to prisoners, and we sent 175,000, my wife and I, to 983 prisons so far. And at the end of the day, that's what motivated me. What motivated me is to make a difference in the world. I get $25,000 speaking fee. I haven't kept $1 of my book revenue, of my speaking fees, of nothing I've done. From my story, I told God I would never keep $1, including the proceeds of my IP for my artistic rights. Because I don't want people saying, oh, he made so much money selling cocaine, now he's doing it selling Jesus. I'm not selling Jesus. I don't care if people accept Jesus or not. That's their problem. I'm nobody's savior. I can't tell you. I ain't going to die for no one. I didn't die for no one. All I can tell people is what's happened to my life. And I thought, look, if the shoe fits, wear it, man. If not, buy another pair of shoes. Yeah. All I can tell you is that the only thing that matters, see, I got this beautiful home. I live like a pauper compared to how I used to live. But I live a heck of a life now. But I'm going to die one day, and I'm going to lay in that bed And my Richard Mille watch ain't coming with me. All my bourbon collection ain't coming with me. But you know what's coming with me? All those lives that I have impacted for God.
Yeah.
All those people had no hope, and I showed them hope. You know, I believe people change when they see that someone has changed. And I can show you hundreds of emails. Just recently, I got one of the most powerful ones. I'll read it to you and I'll send it to you. When I was in the jail in Miami, there was a young guard, good-looking kid, Italian kid, about 20-some years old. And, you know, he always talked about how he was a big partier and he had all these women. And he was reading a book, and I walked by him one day. And I said, "Hey, Mr. Emilio, quit reading that crap, man. Read the Bible." And he laughed at me and says, "Ain't nobody read the Bible to me." But I kept talking to him, and then he knew who I was and the reputation I had. And he would come at 11 o'clock at night and open my cell so I could read out of the Bible. I said, "Look, read the Bible. Don't read it as a religious book." I said, I started reading it as a book of war stories, historical book. Mm-hmm. And then when I went to read the New Testament, I just read it as a book of morals. That's it. And I did. And then I left. He recently just reached out to me. Now, this was 1984. He reached out to me, 94, I'm sorry. He reached out to me and says, "When you left, I went to a club that night and I couldn't stay there. I had to leave. And then I went back to my house and I turned on TV and it was about the 10 Commandments. Then I go to sleep and I get this feeling that someone's praying for me." Because I told him, I said, "Look, I'm going to pray for you. God's going to change your life." Well, long story is, he turned his life around, became a Christian, and has a beautiful family. And he says, "I want you to know I'm still walking in the same footsteps you taught me back in 1994.
Wow.
94, 04, 14, 24, 30 years
30
ago.
years. And look at you now. I mean, you've got 6 kids that are beautiful and incredibly successful and educated. I mean, despite, you know, that era, you really achieved the American dream, materially, spiritually, and familially. Was your dad proud of you before he passed?
Oh, yes. He passed in my arms.
Wow.
You know,
But did he realize that? He's like, this suffering that me and your mom put ourselves through by leaving Cuba, by leaving the life that we had of opulence, did he realize it was worth it?
He saw me turn my life around. He saw me earn my PhD. He did not see me build a company because he passed literally a month before I got married 27 years ago. And but he saw me change, and that's all that mattered to him. And my mother did see me build our company and all that. And, to me, what is the American dream? Or to me, what is the greatest gift God has given me? Is that fact that my kids want to come home when they no longer need to. And if you can achieve that, if your kids desire to see you when they don't have to, when they don't depend economically from you, when your kids become better than you, my son, my middle son, he's on his way to become a billionaire. My daughters, they're all successful attorneys. My oldest daughter who saved my life, she dedicated her whole life to special needs, to helping kids that are hurting, that have educational, that have issues, have deficiencies, etc. So when you see that, and when we are constantly together, like 2 years ago for our 25th anniversary, I took 17 of us between children and in-laws and all that on a Disney cruise, and grandchildren. And our grandchildren adore us. And a lot of that, honestly, I owe to my wife, because only 2 of the 6 are hers. But my wife never made a difference between those are mine and these are yours. Mm-hmm. And they adore her. And my grandchildren adore her. I think they love my wife more than me because she loves children. She plays craft. But she always made sure that our kids was our priority. Mm-hmm. We sacrificed vacation to give them an opportunity. And we had challenges, enormous challenges. That middle son that's going to be so successful overdosed at the age of 16.
Wow.
and he was lost. And thank God, I was real tight with the judge because he was out of control in his mother's house.
Yeah.
And the judge had him sentenced to teen challenge. I was serving on the national board and for a year, and then sentenced him to my house. He said it was the hardest, living with me was the hardest thing he ever did in his life. But, I taught him what's important in life.
Now he's a tech millionaire and on his way to inventing new AI companies. And it's just really remarkable, everything that you've experienced in one lifetime. And I really deeply appreciate you for letting me sit down with you, come into your home and capture a piece of history that will never be repeated again. And to me, besides the fact that you achieved the unachievable, which is to be truly a narco godfather and to have escaped death and life in prison and overdose and to be living this life of God and abundance now, aside from all that, having lived through that very brief, incredible period of world history, does part of you feel honored that you got to go through that? Like, do you see now what you went through as a gift?
It's like people ask me, will you do it again? I don't live in the past, so I can't answer that. Do you miss your life? Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. Listen, every time, tomorrow I'm going to go on an airplane and coach. You don't think that I'd rather drive up to the jet and get on my big old fat hawker or have everything I wanted? But I don't miss the consequences that the life brought and the emptiness. See, in life, if you find meaning in things, you'll never be happy. Meaning must come within you, must be in you. This is why the biggest message that I would like to send to people is, look, it's okay. Look at Narcos, look at Griselda, look at all those, enjoy them. They're all fiction, it's fine. But just know that it's not reality. And it's not my story. See, all those stories is the same. Poor kid, drops out of school, out of high school, joins the life of crime, becomes very wealthy, lives a lavish lifestyle.
Kills a bunch of people.
Dies. That ain't my story. I didn't die. I didn't kill anybody. I got an education. And I was able to reinvent my life. Yeah, I did 10 years in prison. Yeah, I suffered torture that I don't wish on my greatest enemy, and I don't have any enemy. I love everybody. Gandhi used to say, I don't defeat people by power. I defeat my enemy by loving him to a point that they no longer see me as an enemy. And I tell people, even the most hardened of all hearts will respond to unconditional love. People need love, man. Yeah. We need to stop this hatred, all this division that we have. And what I pray that my story does is, like, I was on Despierta America, which is like the Good Morning America in Spanish. And one of the hosts said, what's different about this story is this. I got a call from my best friend and said to me, after listening to that story, I now have hope for my son.
Wow.
And that's all I care, man. All I care is that hopefully one child doesn't have to live without his father. One father doesn't have to bury a child. One person doesn't divorce their wife. Families are not broken. That people stay together. That people love people. And that changed the world for the best. There's a whole generation that's looking at us and they're looking at nothing but hatred. We're fighting over presidents that ain't going to do crap for you. None of them. I don't care, starting from George Washington to now. If it's up to you, if it's going to be up to you. And whoever our leaders are, pray. Whether you voted for them or not, pray for them. We need to pray more. And we can change the world. We can make this a better place for our kids. We're going to be gone. I'm 69. I'm going to have 10, 20, 30 years. I'm going to be gone. I got less than what I've lived. I never thought I'd live past 23. So, I just thank God that every day I get an email, every other book that goes out. And it's been very expensive for my wife and I. I mean, we could have bought a house with what we spent. And people say, why? You don't even know who these people are. I said, I don't have to. On this earth, I might on the second earth.
Jorge, where can they find your book?
It's on Amazon. It's called Coming Clean. Different books that I have. I have a devotional that I wrote with my son, who's the tech guy, on, how to, a journal on how to become better, the principle. Because I use the same principles all my life for building everything, Mm-hmm. And so I talk a lot about that. But they can follow me on Instagram, Dr. Jorge Luis Valdez. I post stuff, and on YouTube, my YouTube channel, Jorge Valdez, PhD. I guess you'll post it.
Yep.
And and the show, stay tuned, because the documentary is going to be Shadow of the Wolf.
And I can't
So how do you know that my story is true? The first DA agent who went after the war on drugs says that I was the first target with Manny Garces. The guy that started it all said I was there at the beginning. So here I am.
Jorge, I hate to just paint you with this one brush, because you're so much more than that, but you truly were the cocaine cowboy. You are the America's cocaine cowboy. You're the real Tony Montana. And you're an inspiration. And I don't know what to say, except talks like these make me happy that I get to do this podcast. And I read your book too. And I learned, it's just an extra piece of faith that you instill in me in my own life. So I encourage everybody to go out and read his books. And we'll switch over to the Patreon now, do a quick little bonus episode, and then you get to go pick up your granddaughter. But thank you.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is the fact that, sadly enough, Hollywood has painted every Hispanic as a waiter or a landscape person. and the sad part with the Tony Montana, which a lot of Cubans loved it because it was really entertaining. It was a good
movie.
But the stereotypical, that's not who we are.
No.
Cubans, we're very hardworking people, man. We came here and we had parents that had unbelievable principles. Yeah. We saw multi-millionaire parents clean toilets and never complain. And yes, we messed up because we're young kids. It was the Cubans that created the drug trafficking in the United States. And we messed up, but it's not who we are.
No.
That's not who we are as a race. Hispanics have contributed enormous to America. We've gone to wars. We've done so much. And I hope that when my documentary comes, it paints a different picture. It does paint a picture of a kid that did mess up, because I was a kid. I was hungry. I wanted to be respected. I wanted to become somebody.
But America loves a comeback story. That's the beautiful part about America. So you may not have been able to inspire all these people if you didn't have the clout that you did from the drug game. So
just think about 3 years after walking away from a prison, I'm sitting talking. The flag officers of the United States Pentagon are who? The head of the Navy, the head of the Air Force, the head of the Army, all this admiral. This group is so tight that in that room, only colonels could be the waiters. And there was no wives allowed or nobody. I had the honor to speak to them.
Wow.
Just 3 years out of prison. I've had the honor to address the United States Congress. I've had the honor to address the White House. I did the Memorial Columbine for Focus on the Family after that event. I've done events in Chile, Argentina. God's opened doors that are unbelievable. I'll tell you the most powerful one. So the gentleman that handles my book, name is Brett McGraw, a saint, was none but a gym teacher in a little town called Holland, Ohio. 3,000 people. Forever and ever. One day he called me up and said, God spoke clearly to me, and I'm to dedicate the rest of my life to sending you books to prisoners. And he's the man that has sent out 170,000 books. But I had this other person heard me I did the National Day of Prayer in Washington, and asked me to come to his high school to talk to his kids. And it was a little high school in Bum, Egypt. I didn't know where it was. And I kept brushing him off. Finally, I was doing another event about 125 miles away. I think I was not on Focus on the Family. I was on with Pat Robertson. Anyway, I told the guy that was helping with the ministry, guy, call him up and ask him if he wants me to go speak to his high school tomorrow at noon. We can be there by noon and still make the event at night. So he called and I said, yeah, he'd love to have you. So I went there and I started talking. So this is after the guy had begged me for 5-6 times for over a year and a half to go there. I went. In the middle of my speech, this kid comes on the bleacher, drops in front of me on his knees, hands me a piece of paper. It was a suicide note. He was going to take his life that day. Had I not come, he would not be with us.
Wow.
So that's what motivates me.
Yeah.
That's what keeps me money.
That's gotta feel,
I've had cars. I've had it all.
it's gotta feel way better than all that, huh?
You know, the fact that when a human being impacts another human being
Yeah.
and makes that person's life better, makes that family better. I have a guy wrote me a letter and said, all I wanted to be, he had been in prison 12 years, young African-American kid, said, all I wanted to do is get out and be a bigger criminal. I wanted to just kill people and die. And he said, I read your book. And he turned my life around. And I get out and I have a beautiful wife and children. And I start a new company. And it's called We Can Do It Better. And people say, do you do it better because you guys are better? They do remodeling. He said, no, it's because everyone that works for me is a convict. And I teach them that we can do it better.
Wow.
And those are the things that keep me moving. A father that just got reunited with his family and said, please don't stop, because I want to be convinced that I can change. Because he's not sure whether he can change or not, but he's trying. You know, we change when somebody else has changed.
That's right.
You know? And that's what keeps me moving. So if the good Lord tells me tomorrow I'm going to die, I'm going to say, let me see which of my bourbon bottles. Bring me that Eagle Rare. Let me have a drink. And Jesus, I'll see you on the other side. And I got a lot of questions for Jesus. I do. I want him to bring out some of the good wine that he served at that wedding in Cana, and I want to ask him about all the questions that I have.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I just operate by loving people, man.
And all those questions will be answered. Don't worry.
Sure. Right now,
time.
we look through a foggy glass. One day, we're going to look through as we are seeing.
Are you going to be ready to go?
Oh, I'm ready to go right now. I was ready to go in Panama. And I didn't know where I was going back then.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't told you this. 2 years ago, they found I have a heart defect. They should have killed me when I was 20. It's called the Widowmaker. And basically, there's two arteries that come from the aorta to the heart. This one, I never had it. It grew here. And it comes underneath. And you've seen Pete Maravich die from it. Mm-hmm. And you'll see young athletes all of a sudden die. They think he had a heart attack, but they didn't. And they discovered it here in Orlando because my wife, when we moved from Palm Beach, wanted us to go to a doctor here. And so he's like, hey, why no one ever did a CAT scan on your heart? And I was with the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio, in Palm Beach, where we live. And I'm like, I don't know. Actually, my Apple Watch is the one that detected, hey, your resting heartbeat normal is 55. It's been over 120 for a week. Because as you can see, I used to do Ironman. And so I'm like, went to cardiology, put me on all this meds, all this stuff. They can't figure it out. Anyway, this one finds it. So after the CAT scan, the nurse came and said, hold on, the doctor wants to see you. So the doctor walks in and he says to me, why are you not dead? So I'm like, you read my book, didn't you? He's like, no, what book? I said, oh, So he goes to explain that I have this heart defect that I could die. I should have died by 20, 30, but I could die any minute. So he says, I need to talk, and he's a college professor. I need to talk to my colleague because we've never seen anyone alive with this. Because most people, they realize that you have this defect when you die in autopsy because you have no symptoms. You're not short of breath. You don't have heart palpitation like a heart attack. So we go see him with my wife on Monday, and he's like, tells me this thing. He said, look, you need to have open heart surgery. And if I was you, I'd go to one of the big doctors. And I said, who? He says, I go to the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio. They're the best in the world. My wife gets on the internet and starts emailing the Cleveland Clinic saying, you bunch of idiots. You've been seeing my husband for 3 years, never detected this. This doctor here, in his first visit, finds out I'm going to sue you when he dies, blah. That night, I'm cooking on my pizza oven, and I get a call. And it's the director of Dr. Gabriel, one of the most famed cardiologists in the world. And she's like, can you come here? This is Monday night. Can you be here Wednesday morning? I'm like, sure, why? Well, doctor, we got all the records. We got your wife's email. And Dr. Gabriel wants to run a series of tests. I said, what tests? And she told me, I said, I just had them done not too long ago. She said, Dr. Gabriel doesn't take anybody's test. She said she wants to run tests Thursday, Friday, a very intrusive test on Monday. Tuesday, you meet with the surgeon. Wednesday, you have open heart surgery. So they run all those tests. Monday, they run a test that, oh my God, man, I thought Panama was a breeze compared to that. And man, they gave me fentanyl 3 times.
Wow.
Because you got to stay awake, and they artificially pump your heart, and your heart stops. So after, and yeah, through this vein, it's like, I felt like they were putting a clothes hanger. And you are like in the electric chair.
Yeah.
I mean, you're strapped where you can't even move. Anyway, so after the test, she comes. And she's like, looks at me like this. And she said, I want to tell you this. Your chances of dying, she said, now hear me. Dying, not living, dying, are the same with the surgery and without the surgery. I'm like, so you mean that if I have this surgery, it doesn't guarantee me that I can live? And she's like, no. She said, we invented the valve you need, but we've never had anyone alive to put it in.
Wow.
As far as we know, you're the only person with this defect.
Wow.
So I said, Doc, I said all that to get to this. I said, Doc, let me tell you how to look at life. I want to live. I love my wife. I love my children. I love my grandchildren. So I'm in no rush to die. But if I die, I'm going to see my mom and dad, some great friends that have died, and I'm going to be with Jesus. Now, I'm estimating that she's not a believer, right? Because the way she looked at me, I said, and Doc, listen carefully. If this Jesus thing is BS, I'm just going to be fertilizer like you, so it don't matter. Yeah. Give me my release paper. I'm going to Costa Rica.
Nice.
And I left, and here I am.
Man, you are one.
I should have died doing, my heart cannot get above 150. It was 180, 190 for 7 hours doing Ironman. Wow. And here I am. So we're going to die the day that is destined for us. It doesn't mean that that's destiny, right? So therefore, you know what? Why worry about it, right?
Jorge Valdez, you are one unique son of a bitch. And I thank you. Go get his book. Go start with his autobiography, Coming Clean. Read his other works. And pour me a glass of bourbon before I get out of here.
All right, brother.
Thank you so much. Take care.
I'll even give you good bourbon.